and myself. We have Karen Borchert from Finance, Rob Gibbs, who is also on Finance and is our N&E director, is on Zoom. We have Mary Quinn from Finance on Zoom. And we also have, as far as our managers, we have Mike Brock, Greg Wadden, and Kevin Leduc in attendance as well. We have a, and I did this in the wrong order as usual, there is a land acknowledgement, an anti-racism statement, which can be found on our website. Are there any announcements? Sorry, are there any announcements? Oh, yeah, I always do it in the wrong order. Okay. Sorry. Move to adopt the agenda.
I move to amend the agenda.
Second it.
I'd like to remove the consent agenda minutes. They're not going to be ready to be provided until the first meeting in August.
We don't need any discussion, so all in favor? Unanimous? Now, are there any announcements? All right, seeing none, we have property owner comments. And just remember that it is 3 minutes per person.
Hi there. I'm Gail Chiarello, Lot 40, Division 21. Although I'm not sure, it might be Lot 21, Division 40, also 16 in that circle. So I've not seen the budget that's under discussion today. I know it's whatever it is, it's a work in progress, and you will be seeking input from one another and seeking input from the community. But I want to share my view that I think it would be unwise for the board this year to adopt a 7% dues increase. I'm sure that there could be justification provided because we've had inflation since 2020. My example is I stop at I call it the Magic Skagit Food Co-op, and a sandwich that used to be $7 is now $13. I mean, we've all seen this. So we know there's been inflation, extraordinary inflation, and our dues haven't reflected that. In fact, before this board came into being, I think the boards for the past 4 years at least had a value of keeping dues as low as possible. And the community has gotten used to that. And so my proposal, or rather my observation, is to suggest that the board not increase dues more than perhaps 3 or 3.5%. And in other words, do an increase incrementally. I'm sure we have a need. There are many other areas of the budget, I think, that probably would benefit by a cash infusion. But I'm not sure that the community is ready for going for the whole 7%. And I would fear a backlash that would make it harder in the future. So that is my 2 cents. And then when I did the math, I think it's also my $10.82, which I would be paying if you went for the whole 7%. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Hello. Hello. I'm Barbara Michelson Harder, and I live at 172 Polo Park Drive. Just to tag on to Gail, I think that it would be really good if
You speak into the microphone.
Oh, I'm not. Am I now? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think it would be really good if, I don't know if we have to change the bylaws or what, if we are going to increase our fee, if we could look at it somehow based on income, and maybe not small income increments, but there's so many people in this valley that have been here forever, that possibly are retired veterans, that possibly have a limited income for whatever reason. 10% to me won't break my bank. It could to somebody else. And I don't know if there's any way that we can look at an increase based on income or not. But I think that that's really something that the board should look at. And I think if we did something like that, then we'd have less pushback from a lot of the population. I know last time we talked about it, I guess when we first moved here 5 years ago, the board had presented really a lot of increase and people were really up in arms. And one of the things that came to light was that veterans have to be able to tell the VA what their cost of living is going to be to get any kind of an increase. And so, I don't know, it's just something to think about. And just another note, on next door, there was all this talk about the fire station, the Sudden Valley Fire Station. So I wrote to the fire chief and he wrote back a really nice letter. I don't know, I posted it on Facebook and on Nextdoor. He was very, very detailed. Really, if you haven't seen it, if you have any questions about the fire station, he really answered a lot of questions. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll be having the budget presentation. And just remember, this is not the time when we're going to be debating it. It is just a presentation. Lori?
Well, it's that time of year again when the fawns are out, kids are swimming, and our staff is busy working on the next year's budget. The process of creating a budget is a very important task our management team undertakes each year. I have had the privilege of walking through the 2025 proposed budget and want to thank Joel, Joanne, and all the managers for their input and dedication to this project. I believe the budget looks really good and it has my full support. Joanne, our general manager, and Joel, our finance director, will be presenting the 2025 proposed budget tonight. Should you have any questions on how a figure was calculated, please ask. If you disagree with the budgeted amount, the board will be discussing such at the August 8th board meeting. Please make your notes for discussion at that time. And I present to you, are you? Okay. Joanne, are you ready? Okay, you have it at it.
Thanks, Lori.
We'd like to start our presentation this evening by talking a little bit about the process that got us here. The budgeting process at Sudden Valley has many participants and many steps. And everyone should start by being reminded that every year we go through this same process. The preparation of the operating and capital budgets is an annual process. When we prepare the budgets, we think about what our expected revenues and expenses are, as well as taking into account the needed repairs and sometimes replacement of any assets that we use to conduct the operations of the association. Every year, SVCA department managers begin their budgeting process by conducting an asset inventory and inspection. And then they submit input on the scope and schedule of repairs or replacements that are needed for those assets. Following that, the treasurer, finance director, and me, the general manager, consolidate the input with other information that we've gathered from third-party sources, such as external vendors and projections of utility increases, and we prepare a draft budget. The finance committee reviews the draft and gives their recommendation to the board of directors. The board then ultimately reviews and approves the budget, which is then presented for a vote of the membership during the annual election. This process ensures that the budget presented to the membership is a consolidated picture of the association's finances.
Okay, so so the bottom line with this budget is this budget, as the screen says, we have projected operating expenditures for 2025 of 4.7 million, and we balance that with 4.7 million in revenues. So the bottom line with this is the proposed monthly dues for the developed lot in 2025 will be, it says 2024, but 2025 will be $156.28. Proposed dues for an undeveloped lot will be $148.41. Now, we also do not have, just like last year, we don't have any additional user fees planned for parks, pools, and fitness center. Now, in terms of, I thought maybe I'd put into perspective in terms of, obviously, everyone has seen prices of everything go up literally everywhere past several years. Now, of course, the good thing is Sun Valley is we've been able to keep dues fairly low for as long as possible. For example, okay, so in 2020, the dues, from 2019 to 2020, the dues went to $144.31 a month. That's on a monthly basis, obviously. This is for a developed lot. So all these numbers that I'll give to you will be on a developed lot basis. So between 2020, 2021, and 2022, and every single one of those 3 years, it stayed static at $144.31. Now in 2023, it was kind of a little interesting year, obviously, because in May of 2023, the rec special assessment expired. So when the rec special assessment expired, of course, according to the SGM, we can only raise dues up to a maximum of 7%. And in that period, at the end of May of 2023, it was 7% on the regular dues, meaning not rec special assessment dues, but regular dues. So ops dues, surf dues, road dues, and mailbox dues. So those are the only dues that we could apply that 7% increase to. So when the rec special assessment expired at the end of May 2023, meaning for June through December of that year, then dues could only become $141.81, applying that 7% increase to the remaining dues in 2023. So January through May, so I said, 2020 through 2022, and each one of those years is $144.31, no change. January through May of 2023 is $144.31, no change. And then June through December of 2023, then the dues actually dropped to $141.81. Of course, keep in mind that's during a period of really high inflationary periods, but there's really no way around it with the SGM. Now, in 2024, we had a 3% dues increase, so the dues went up to $146.06. And but if you looked at it in terms of the average of the monthly dues that you paid, if you looked at 2023 and 2024, the average monthly dues, because it dropped the last 7 months, 2023 to $141.81. So yes, true in 2024, it's gone up to $146.06, but the average of those 2 years means the monthly dues is $144.46. So literally, it was an increase of 15 cents. You could think about it like that. Or even if you looked at the period of 2020 all the way through 2024, the average monthly dues is $144.37. That's kind of, in a sense, what everyone has paid on it, or will have paid by the end of 2024 on an average basis. So, and also in 2023 and especially 2024, when the rec special assessment expired, we elected to, which was the best thing to do at that time, we elected to apply the dues increase, the 7% that we were allowed to, all the way to operations, because that rec special assessment was captured within operations. So in a sense, the dues that have been, the rec special assessment, you can think over the last couple of years, has been exchanged for regular operating dues now at this point, to keep operations as funded as it has been in those prior years. So now in terms of for 2025, so with the proposed dues of $156.28, that literally means that your dues have gone up from your 2020 amount by 8.3% over Of course, this would be a 6-year period, 2020 through the year 2025. Now, one big difference here with this dues increase, unlike the other years, because we didn't really have an opportunity, like I said, those dues increases went to operations to replace the the rec special assessment. This will be the first time since 2020 that we're applying dues increases, not just operations, but now surf, roads, and mailboxes will all be increased 7% as well. So this slide will show you right here. So you can see at the very top, the ops line, 2024, it's right now $72.16. 2025, it's $77.21. Surf, currently it's $36.10. Now keep in mind, all these capital amounts, surf 3610, roads 3713, mailbox 67 cents. Those amounts have remained unchanged from the year 2020. So now this is the first time in 2025 that we'll increase those 7% with the exception of mailbox. It looks like 6%, but this is more of a rounding thing since it's such a small, not even a dollar, it's in the cents period. But so this is why it's saying the percent change in total is going up 7% from 2024. So true, I mean, in 2023, technically we raised dues by 7%, but that was, we raised regular operating dues. But if you just looked at how much money you actually paid, just forget about what category it went to. The dues in 2023, even though it was a 7% increase to the regular operating dues, your total payment dropped from $144.31 to $141.81. And then in 2020.
Joel, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you guys know that the PowerPoint that's on the webinar is not advanced. The slides haven't advanced past the title page. So we're not seeing the data that you're presenting. I'm sorry, Joel. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, no problem. Right.
Thank you, Rob.
Does it say share? No. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, sure. Thanks for pointing that out, Rob. What do you see now, Rob? Can you see the,
Yeah, now I see the 2025 dues proposal.
okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought you'd want, everyone would want to be able to see this that's watching.
So basically, Rob, that was that's the one slide that you missed. It's just showing the bottom line of the proposed monthly dues for a developed lot, 156.28. Any proposed developed dues for a undeveloped lot, vacant lot, 148.41. And then this is showing the breakdown. Of course, this is shown on the next slide as well, but this is just in a pie chart showing you the breakdown of where these dues will go. So the blue here is operating funds, 7721. Yellow here is the surf, $38.63. Green is roads, $39.73. Mailbox reserves, this really small, tiny slice, 71 cents. And then this is the chart that shows year over year, 2024, where we're currently in, and then the 2025, the orange header columns. And yeah, okay, so that's where we left off. So basically, you can see the annual totals. 2024, 1,700. We'll just round this, $53. 2025, 1,875, and then the dollar change per month would be $10.22. So now this document, of course, this will go on the website after the meeting tomorrow, but unfortunately I can't zoom in on this PowerPoint presentation, but this is showing you, and this shows up in the budget document every single year. And so this is a handy document. It's showing you this far left column is the 2020 dues structure. And column obviously to the right of that is 2021, the 2022, and then where you see this blue and then green and then gray headers here. This is the 2023. So basically it's showing you January through May what the due structure was, then June through December, and then the annual total. And then second from the far right is the 2024, what we're in right now. And obviously this far right column is the 2025 dues. So you can see that pro forma. So you can see for the dues, for the operating dues, that this budget had taken $2,713,279. And by the way, this due structure, like the prior years, is calculated on a 95% collection rate. And that's on 3,120 lots. That's the current breakdown right now. So we have 2,753 developed lots and 367 vacant lots or undeveloped lots. And then the SURF, of course, this might be difficult to see, but tomorrow you'll be able to see it more clearly when you look at the document. But you can see the pro forma or the SURF, the projected revenue coming in at a 95% collection rate is $1,373,992. Roads after 95% collection, $1,413,117, and mailbox after the 95% collection, $25,253. And if you're wondering, by increasing the due 7% kind of down the board, ops, SURF, roads, mailboxes, how much of an increase will that give to these funds? Assuming, let's just say we didn't raise the dues at all, and then based off of 2,753 developed lots and 367 undeveloped lots at a 95% collection rate, by increasing it 7%, operations will take in an additional 177,443. SURF will take in just real close to $90,000 increase. Roads will take in 92,477. Mailbox, just a paltry 1,422. But those are the increases that will go into the funds by increasing the dues to the 7%. And you can see, okay, you can see here, this is a slide that shows up from year to year in these budget documents, but this just shows you, so this basically, and this is based off of the capital planning, which we'll get into too here real quick. So this is showing you how much the dues need to be to make sure that everything's paid for. And obviously, once you get beyond the year 2025, 2026 through 2034, it's really the real focus is on that 10-year capital plan. But the 10-year capital plan right now is structured so theoretically the dues would not have to go up from 2025. They could remain flat. And according to our 10-year capital plan, everything would be paid for.
Joel, can I ask a question about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Are we putting that assumption into the reserve study that dues will be flat?
Yes. Yes.
So we'll be able to see in our reserves percentages. Okay.
And that's also, you'll see once we get to the capital plan after that. So I'll just wait till we get to that. But this chart shows up every single year in the budget document. But you can see this pie chart shows you the revenue that's coming in based off of all the dues. So you can see this big blue or a light blue pie slice is the operations regular dues coming in. You'll see this dark blue is, well, let me do the dues first. So the light blue is obviously the regular dues, operational dues coming in. This kind of tan color is the SURF fund of the dues coming in, $38.63 a person for, and that 30, obviously, just to repeat, so the capital dues do not matter if it's a developed lot or an undeveloped lot. So it's the same for everyone. The operation dues are a little bit lower for a vacant lot versus a developed lot. And you can see this mustard color slice is the road portion of the pie chart, showing the dues of $39.73. And there's that dollar amount that I already mentioned from the previous slide, $1,413,000, and same with SURF, $1,373,000. Operations, $2.7 million here. And then we have this really small slice at the very top, which is just the mailbox fund, 71 cents. And then these bottom two slices, you can see, this is the marina, the dark blue slice. So this is showing that marina is actually with the money that comes into Marina, this is reducing dues by $6.14. So theoretically, if we didn't have this revenue coming into the Marina, then the operation dues would have to go up $6.14. And same thing with golf. So golf is reducing operational dues by $1.77. That just means they'll have an operating net income that basically is kind of offsetting dues at that point. And same thing for the Marina. Now, this next slide here shows you a summary of operations budget by department. So you can see this is the 2024 budget, far left column. The column to the right of that is the 2025 proposed budget. And these numbers, we'll just look at the top one here. This is common costs. Now, your dues, your regular dues goes into the common cost category. So just, that's actually the first line in the revenue kind of section down below that. So actually, let's look at operations below that. So the operations line item, you can see $580,197 in 2024. Now, these amounts right here these are the net expenses, or you could think of it as the net profit, so to speak, for those operations. Obviously, these are operational departments, so these will run losses since they're not obviously big revenue centers. But so some of these, like facilities, here's a good one, $181,851 budget in 2024. We have, so basically it's a net loss of $181,851, 2025 proposed budget, net loss of $205,494. Now, obviously we get lease revenue that comes into the facilities department. So these are all the expenses after the lease revenue. So you could, basically facilities is a net loss, think about it like that. Versus down below, you can see operations, this is just the regular dues. There's that kind of in the middle column for the most part, that 2.7 million for operations regular dues. And then below that, golf enterprise, 62,827. That's golf turf combined. So that's their net profit, so to speak. And same thing with Marina. So these are showing that this is actually contributing money into the organization after all the expenses. So that's why you see the that's why you see this whole thing balancing. And this next pie chart right here, and this shows up in the budget document year after year. So this is just showing you what your operation dues pay for. So like I said, the operation dues here budgeted is $77.21 for 2025 for a developed lot. And here's the breakdown of where all that goes. So you can see that $9.43 of this goes to common costs for property taxes and insurance and so on and so forth. $15.73 in the slice to the right of that goes to admin, which is operations. Then you can see the accounting towards the bottom, $11.31 of your regular operating dues goes to accounting, facilities, $5.30, maintenance, just going right around this pie chart, $15.17, ACC security, $10.69, the rec center, $6.70, and pools, $2.88. So if you add all of those dollars amounts up, it'll come right up to $77.21. So that's the breakdown of where your operating dues goes to pay. Okay, so basically this chart is just kind of a high level kind of summary of the big changes that we took into account for the budget. So obviously the big change out here is we're a unionized workforce. So the good thing about that, which actually makes it handy, is the fact that we know precisely how much the salaries will go up from year to year. So from 2024 to 2025, the collective bargaining agreement calls for mandates 3% increase for the workforce. So salaries have gone up 3%. It also, in the CBA, obviously everyone has their health insurance paid for, so that's factored in here to this budget. One of the other items that really went up is the property insurance. So all of our major insurance policies have gone up, as you could kind of expect over these years. And there have been changes, so all the managers behind me have made all of their input into these budgets in terms of how much they feel they really need to run operations for maintenance and turf care and keep in mind maintenance and parks are budgeted together and golf and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the second bullet point here points out that basically when we renewed our major insurance policies in June, there was an increase of approximately, well, $30,326 that we paid more in our June renewals of our major policies versus June of 2023. So you can see how much that insurance has gone up for us. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through this operating budget. Obviously, we were planning. No. So I'm going to quickly run through this operating budget. Obviously, now we originally had planned to spend a whole evening on operations budget and then another evening on the capital budget. So at least one good thing is now we can quickly go through this and just kind of distill everything right to the bottom line. So I'm just going to hit on the really big changes of the line items, and then I'll leave off obviously the inconsequential things or the things that really aren't that material to the changes of the budget overall. But you can see in the common costs category right here, okay. So that line item right here in the common cost category, that's where you see the operational dues. So you'll see, and this is based off of a 95% collection rate. 2024 is based off a 95% collection rate. 2023 was also, but you'll see that, and this is obviously based off of, like I said before, now from year to year, obviously the kind of the composition of the developed lots and undeveloped lots change. So you'll have more lots, as lots get developed, then you'll increase in developed lots and lose undeveloped lots, meaning that amount will go down. So like I said, it's based off of 3,120 lots total, 2,753 developed, 367 undeveloped. But you can see there's that, it's roughly going up by 7% here, 7.02% with that compositional change from 2024 to 2025. And I'll also point out too, so the far left column, this is the 2020 actual numbers. Then the column next to that obviously is the 2021 actual numbers, then the 2022 actual, 2023 actual. Then the column to the right of that, before you get into the budget numbers, is the April 2024 year-to-date actual numbers. And then you'll see the 2024 budget numbers, third column from the far right. And then next to that is the 2025 budget. And then the last column is the budget percent change. So that's where you'll see the percentage change from the 2024 budget to the 2025 budget. And we'll just quickly go through this. And we'll just hit on the major, of course, I've already given you like a quick summary of the major things that have changed, but I guess I'll just point this out real quick. So obviously we're earning more interest in our accounts, our reserve accounts. So that's reflected here in the operating budget.
The interest that you earn for reserve accounts goes into operations?
No. Those go into the capital accounts. These are just the operating.
Oh, okay. What percent do you know? I'm getting.
I was going to look up to see what that exact percent was.
You can tell me the next one.
Yeah. So the next page, like I said, I'm just going to quickly hit on the highlights, because then after that we'll go into the capital budget. But you can see there's the insurance amount that has gone up 23.7%. It's gone from 166,810 to 206,416 for 2025. And obviously, our policies, most of them expire in June. So part of this will be, through June of 2025, and then it's based off of a forecasted 10% increase starting July of 2025 from there on out. So the 10% is what we used. Basically, like I said, we renewed basically most of our policies at the end of June. And then, and those policies will be good through June of 2025. And then from July on for the rest of 2025, we factored a 10% possible increase in insurance then. Okay. So, just quickly. So now that we're in here into accounting, you can see this is audit and tax services. So it's just gone from 40,000 to 49,000. That's just a factor in, just an increase in possible audit costs. But also in 2025, for budget year 2026, we're going to need a level 2 reserve study. So this year we're doing a level 3, which is just a non-site update. But next year we'll have to do a level 2. So I factored some more money in for that, which would take place in 2025 for the 2026 budget. Now, this is going to be the same drill pretty much on every department. Just the bottom line here. So you can see that payroll and benefits. So we have salaries here, then we have obviously payroll taxes, medical benefits. Now we do have a new line item that I already picked up in the highlighting. That's called payroll benefits retirement. Now this is another thing with the new collective bargaining agreement that was settled on. And basically what it says is that we will do a 401k match up to 1.5% of an individual's pay, basically. So obviously we didn't know precisely how many people take advantage of that. So we just figured, just a rough estimation, we just figured half of that on total salaries. So we'll know at the end of 2024, what that really means. But it's not really, either way, it's not a material amount that really makes or breaks the whole budget really at all. It's really, it's such a small number. The only reason why I'm mentioning it is just because it's a new GL line item. You'll see here in facilities, we started doing this for the most part. Well, for 2024, like lease income, barn 8, you'll see is now showing up in here for Christ the King Church. And now formerly previously this was captured in the rec department. So we moved our major leases to the facilities. So you'll see the lease income for the restaurant here. And then this is the barn for Christ the King, and then the library lease. So that's why you'll see like zeros right here for years before that. Now, when we get to the rec slide, you'll see lease income in there for the barn 8, but then you'll see nothing for 2024. So it's the opposite basically. But basically you'll see that lease income has gone from approximately 50,000, 58,000. Not a huge increase, but in case you're wondering why there are zeros there, that's essentially why. Okay, so now that we're into facilities here, I have mentioned that utilities have gone up. So what we've done is we've factored basically a 5% increase on basically like the 2023 utilities going on here for the most part. Communications is a little higher in some departments, basically to factor in VoIP services and Comcast contract services.
One note on the communications increase. In previous years, communications, particularly phone services, were delivered through a hybrid VoIP system, which required on-site hardware. So that was a capital expense. By transitioning to a pure VoIP product that is a virtual product on a subscription basis, it becomes an operational expense. So since our budgets are separate, you see it impact on operations without understanding that there's a decrease on the capital side as well.
Now for facilities, the only person we have here for salaries, because I mentioned this in past years, but so we have the janitor in here, the custodian in facilities.
Is it still just one? I saw it increase like 11% for salaries. Is that still just one or additional hours, or is that just?
No, actually, that's a good question. So the reason why you'll see things that don't look like, hey, that's more than 3%, is so when we made the 2024 budget, the CBA was not finalized at that point. Actually, we didn't even really start the major talks until early 2024 this year. So we factored a 3% increase for, between 2023 to 2024, 3% increase, which kind of mirrored the prior increases on the previous CBA.
Okay.
But now, when the CBA was finalized, many of these departments have a much higher increase in 2024 than just 3%. So
So it's a true up plus
it's a
what you're
true up,
budgeting for
so-
next year. So you are not budgeting additional custodial
No, no,
hours.
no. Yeah, not at all. No. And actually, actually, now that we're on hours, that'd be the perfect time to point out just in terms of payroll in general. So like, so any of these payroll numbers that you see on any of these slides, so all this payroll is budgeted on at the current staff structure that we have right now, which was the same as what we had when we were doing the budget from last year. The only area where we put some more hours in was just in, for lifeguards. That was it. We just trued up some lifeguard hours just to reflect just the reality of how many hours lifeguards are serving in those pools. But other than that, exact same positions and same FTEs across the board in every single department. So literally this is all based off of the current structure right now, current rates, and then 3% on top of that to comply with the CBA.
Numbers are a great way to look at a budget, obviously, but they don't always translate clearly to actual practice. In actual practice, we do have a seasonal custodian with us for the summer months. That allows us to clean the amenity bathrooms, the golf bathrooms, the marina bathrooms, other bathrooms on the weekend when our normal custodian is not, our regular full-time custodian is not working. Although he works Tuesday through Saturday, it leaves us Sunday and Monday, and those are obviously after a weekend, those are big days to clean those restrooms. So we have a seasonal who provides that service.
Now we're going right into golf management. So you'll see that so the first thing here, the major category, excuse me, just so in terms of just overall revenue right here has been budgeted. So in 2023, our actual revenues were 1.47 million essentially. And in 2025, we budgeted 1.425 million in revenue. So we've increased the budget of revenue. Of course, golf is obviously the one thing where like we hope this trend keeps continuing where we have even more revenue than that. But it's also on one hand trying to be just a tad bit conservative in terms of budgeting just in case, whether it's weather related or whatever.
Yeah, the challenge with golf revenue is that it comes in during the good weather months, which are later in the year. So if you overspend in the early part of the year before you know what your revenues are going to look like, that would be a bad idea. So to be conservative on the revenue estimate is a tradition, because if you look and compare budgets to actuals in those other years, the budget was in most years under what was actually produced.
Pay for golf payroll as well. It's the same drill as any other departments. So basically it's just, golf wages right now, with this, and then obviously trued up in 2020, obviously the 2024 costs right now in terms of payroll costs reflect the new CBA, which it's a 3-year CBA, 2024 through 2026, and then bumped up 3% from that point forward as well for 2025. And it'll be the same thing in every department. In utilities, it's the same thing going on. You'll see this increase from 33,000, 42,000 essentially. And for the most part, we're comparing actuals in 2023 and bumping those up 5% or maybe a little more, especially communications if it appears to possibly be warranted.
You can see that the 2024 budget does not reflect the actual performance of 2023 because obviously it was prepared in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a little bit of a lag. We have to catch up with the actual utility costs that weren't available when preparing the 2024 budget. And you can see a dramatic increase in the cost of natural gas, for example. And then trash recycling was a significant bump as well.
And vehicle fuel is another line item. So you'll see it went from 10,500 to 14,840, and I'm doing the exact same thing where I'm looking at these 2023 numbers and I'm bumping that up by an additional 5%. Now this goes into recreation right after that. Turfcare will come after a couple other departments too. So the golf enterprise is obviously made up of golf and turf care. So when you see the golf budget, that's just golf. That's not both combined. You'll see turf in a moment. However, in the monthly financial statements, when they come out, I combine them into a consolidated golf enterprise statement. Basically with rec, I mean, really not even worth talking about, but we do have a little more increased budget for facility rentals. And you'll see some of these non-dues revenue line items have been increased to reflect the reality. Okay. So with rec, we're on total payroll and benefits right here. So you'll notice that the rec payroll and benefits didn't go up as much as the other departments. That's because rec has a heck of a lot more seasonal people who are hourly workers. So you would expect to see a smaller increase because of that. And utilities, communications, same thing going on with the rec department. So you can kind of see the trend of where we have bumped up in these departments. And department managers have bumped up certain line items in their respective departments. Sometimes it's worth talking about, sometimes not. It just depends on the total dollar amount and the total percentage change combined for me to flag it tonight.
Yeah, it's not a large amount, but it's a large percent increase that I'd like to mention here under other supplies. That's actually parts to replace the deteriorating pads on the weight equipment in the fitness center. That equipment is a little bit older, and all of the replacement pads that we get for it now have to be special ordered, and their price significantly rises because of that fact. So in order to maintain the equipment that we have, which we recently had evaluated, and a professional's opinion was that it was in great shape and it had many additional years, 3 to 5 additional years of life in the weightlifting equipment. But we do need to maintain it in order to keep it safe to use, because those pads are obviously an important part of it. And that's why we bumped it up there. But it's certainly cheaper than replacing it.
So that's the weight machines, not free weights you're talking about. You're talking about weight
Weight machines and the cardio machines.
Great.
Now we're getting into the maintenance department here. And so, the material increase right here will be obviously, once again, under payroll and benefits. So it's not just a combination of the 3%, so on and so forth, but you'll also see right here, just to be kind of a little more on the safe side, this weather payroll and weather payroll tax. So I have bumped that up from 2024, we budgeted 10,000. You can see we spent approximately close to 9,000 of that for 2024. So 2025, I bumped it up from 10 to 15,000, just in case we have some more weather events, just to build a little more of a cushion into that. And so some of the maintenance time is also, so this doesn't reflect, 100% of the maintenance salaries. Obviously, some of this maintenance time is also captured in roads, so doing culvert vegetation control and any other type of like street signs or any other budgeted type roads work as well. And that's how it's gone from year to year to year. Okay, then just to point out a couple of things, like you'll see right here. Vehicle fuel, we've already talked about that. It's 5% increase over 2023. But like small tools and equipment, here's a good example. It went from 7,500 to 12,000. And this is all obviously from Mike giving us this input of how much he feels that he would possibly need during 2025 based off of his workload and the state of things at this point. Okay, so Marina, here's the next most interesting category right here. So right here, so the total marina income, actually, this is kind of one of the departments where it makes it a little more easier to budget for, especially this revenue, because this revenue is pretty predictable at this point. So what you're looking at for a 2025 budget right here is, that is the actual revenue or through June of 2024. So we're repeating that for the 2025 budget.
To say that another way, we're not expecting to increase marina rates in 2025. The budget is not taking into account or expecting an increase. The board may choose to raise marina rental fees next year. And if so, that would lead to collecting more revenue than is anticipated. But this budget took a conservative stance and is not counting on an additional increase in revenue.
Okay, so getting into the admin department, basically, just a couple line items I'll point out will be, I mean, it's not a huge dollar amount, but obviously printing and photocopying has gone up to 6,500. So it's gone up 3,500 to 10,000.
Our printer leases expired this year and were renewed. The number reflects the actual. And if you look back at that, we'll be paying going forward into 2025. And if you look at 2023, you'll see that the costs had risen to more than 8,000, even though the budget last year was for 6,500. So
Okay, and then we do have more budget here for the annual general meeting. 18,000 to 24,000. Here's the payroll and benefits, exact same thing going on. It's obviously this one looks a little lower too, but this is just literally just based off of current payroll right now, bumped up 3%. And of course, we didn't have some of these positions filled in 2023 when we put together the 2024 budget. Okay, so IT support and services, this would be really the only other material line item. Anything you wanted to mention about that?
well, if you look back to the 2023 actual, we did not have the position of help desk specialist filled for most of 2023. So we were calling on our external vendor, Larson Gross, for many additional services. This year, we do have a permanent or a full-time employee in that position. And so we are seeing far fewer charges, and you can see the year-to-date charges through April there reflect a bit of a reduction. And so that's why the 40,000 seems reasonable.
Okay. Parks, now you'll notice 2024, there was nothing budgeted because last year Mike wanted everything to just be budgeted for in maintenance. So parks and maintenance you can think about are one in a sense, like in terms of a cost center. So we'll skip over parks. So 2025, zero, the same as 2024. Okay, for the pool, so we have main pool income right here, increased from 14,550 to 25,000.
Yeah, we've learned that our rates for renting out the pool for parties are significantly lower than our competition. So for next year, we'll be at a more reasonable market rate, and that will drive it. We sold out, as it were, the 2 nights per week that we're allowed to rent the quiet pool, the private parties. We sold that out well before the middle of July. So it's a very popular venue, and we need to realize more revenue from it.
What
Yeah.
about, oh, sorry, I was just gonna ask about the fees for just main pool entrance. What is your benchmark? Who do we compare to for those?
We're below. what people charge for access to the pools, but it's unclear how many non-resident passes we sell. We did see last year a pickup, an increase in the number of non-resident passes that we're selling because of the swim lessons. Many non-residents, I guess, who live in Glen Haven or other adjacent communities found
Need
it more,
that.
more convenient to come here for their swim lessons. And to do that as non-residents, they needed to have a pool pass. Then they discovered that it's a great pool and they can use that pool pass at other times. And so we see, we've already hit capacity at the pool on more than a few dates.
Many days.
Many days. And last year, that was not the case. We did not max out until well into August. And last year was a lot warmer.
Mhm.
So you can't say that that's weather driven. I think the pool has just become a very popular venue.
Yeah, it's very popular with the Geneva people too, because they go to school together and it's close by, so.
Okay, so moving on, literally just two departments left. So the ACC Security Department, you'll see new home construction fees have been increased 75,000 to 100,000. And that's just to reflect the increase of new home construction fees going on right now that we bring in. Compliance fees and fines, 2,000 to 30,000. These are revenue amounts.
Yeah, we began actively enforcing compliance with builders last year and collecting fines when they did not avoid the violations that we pointed out to them, and that's continuing. So you can see for yourself what we've collected in terms of fines. They're pretty significant. Now, our goal is not to drive revenue through the collection of fines, but when you communicate the rules and make it clear what the penalties are and people persist in committing violations, you have no choice but to fine them. And the trend has been that there are plenty of violations, so.
So do we need to raise our fines?
Mhm.
I think we need to let it settle out a bit. We just.
So this big change, hazardous tree removal, obviously from 50,000 to 100,000, this obviously goes without saying. You can see I'll just highlight both of these. The 2023 actual 144,438. Now, one difference in 2023 is we did not go to UDR. We didn't hit UDR for any of this. So this is literally everything in 2023. Through April of 2024, it's 59,000, well, real close to 60,000. Then obviously we had that UDR request, $50,000 UDR request that basically now we are putting tree expenses, removal expenses to that at this point until that's exhausted. But that's why you see this line item, just to be more realistic, going from 55,000 to 100,000.
And the 100,000 is a conservative estimate.
Yeah, and like I said, like in prior years, like if you look at these kind of amounts through here, but like 2020, 2021, like these numbers were also supplemented with UDR type requests as well. Not all of them, but definitely a couple of them. This is not a huge increase, but I guess we'll just point out, this is a big expense, obviously, to the association and to SEC as well, but the professional security services, so this is the line item that pays for the security that you see out there in the association. So it's going from 290,000 to 300,000, the contract for security for 2025 budgeting.
Our contract limits their annual increase to 3%. This year, we added a few extra dollars to cover the extra hours that we use security. We often, when there's a holiday and we expect a lot of traffic in the summer in the marina and other amenities, we do ask for a second security guard to be present. And so those couple of extra days add up, and that's why the budget went up by more than 3%.
Then I guess the only other material line item change for ACC would be the safety and security services going from 15,000 to 25,000.
This year, we've experienced many camera failures. Last year, we transitioned really between the end of 2022 into 2023, we transitioned away from Security Solutions to Guardian. That transition achieved a much better camera interface and a much better access or software to get at the stored videos. And we've used those videos to find several perpetrators of vandalism and to give us clues about how certain things happened. So it's paid off in an improvement in the system. But what we've been experiencing this year is a failure in the hardware that's out in the field. We've had to replace several cameras in order to keep it operational. And so we anticipate that that's going to continue until all the cameras cycle through their life cycle and get replaced, hence the increased fee.
So the last department here to talk about is Turfcare. Obviously, like I said before, golf and Turfcare go together. Total payroll and benefits, it's the same thing. It's just the exact same thing. What I described before in the other departments is just the 2024 actuals that have gone up because of the new CBA that was basically entered into in February of 2024, and 3% on top of that. And then obviously seasonal hours are in this as well for Turfcare. Utilities, exact same thing for Turfcare, just looking at prior utilities and raising that. And then equipment lease and rental right here.
Greg is here and he can speak for himself, but I know that we've had several irrigation pipe failures that needed to be quickly dug out and repaired in order to maintain playing conditions, and the equipment to quickly access those pipes needs to be rented. The small excavators, we don't own one. Yeah, so and the pipes are older, so we don't think that's going to stop happening. We're lucky that we can repair them, that Greg can repair them quickly and so inexpensively, relatively speaking.
The final pages of this, which we won't go over, but just to point out, if anyone was wondering, like a certain GL or, a certain line item, obviously that will be accompanied with a GL. You're wondering, oh, geez, what would that be for all the departments added together? Well, the last pages of the budget document have, as you see, an all departments summary right here. So like if we wanted to, we'll just pick on payroll. If you wanted to see, total payroll for the whole association for operations, there it is right there. There's the 2024 budget to 2025 budget, and you could do the exact same thing for utilities right here. But that's the handy thing about the pages at the end of this budget document.
Go up to income.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we don't talk a lot about the operational income except where it allows a department to achieve a net profitability, which really is sort of deceptive, since none of our departments, if they were accounted for as a typical business with a combined financial statement, including both operational and capital expenses, none of them would turn a profit. However, because capital is managed separately, we do have several departments, marina and golf, or two, I guess, that turn a profit. But it's interesting to me to look at the income streams, and this is the place to do it. You can see going back to 2020, the marina wet slip income has increased significantly over time. Also, you can see dry slip and combo broken out there as well. And you can see that there are consistent increases in most of the categories where we're collecting income, certainly in golf and they're in the marina as well. If you go to the next page, you can see lease income for the restaurant was relatively flat, but other lease income is increasing, and that's due to a consistent focus on moving towards market rates or approaching market rates for the things that we sell, like access to this building or access to the pool. And we'll continue to focus on that for next year. And we'll actually, over the next couple of months, look at the fines and fees as a whole instead of piecemeal and bring it to the board for approval before the end of the year. So just a final note.
I want to tag on that a little bit. I just did a quick calculation. I hope I did it right. That there's since 2020 that we've had a 29% increase in ops expenses cumulative over the time, which is pretty close to inflation over that time. But I think you said, Joel, our dues have only increased, like, what did you say? It will be 8% or something like that. So it's been these other streams of revenue that have been able to absorb these additional expenses that we've been incurring in operations, like salary increases and being able to handle more hazard trees and things like that. So it's really these other streams that have been able to accomplish that.
Yeah. The other good thing about, I'll point out too on this all department summary is here's lease income. Remember how I said before that, well, some years it was previously in rec department, then we moved to facilities. Well, instead of having to go back and forth, if you really wanted to look at this one line item, it's like, well, I have to look at facilities and then I have to go and look at rec for 2020 through 2022. You don't have to do that in the all department summaries. It's all right here. So it doesn't matter what department it used to be in. It's still going to be right there in the all department summary on the GL line item. And here's the bottom line, as I pointed out on literally, I think it was the first slide. There's the $4,287,474 in total expenses. Obviously, if you look up above, you'll see the same amount of revenues, and that's why we have a budgeted net income in 2024 of 0 and 2025 of 0 too.
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead.
Just gonna, in case anyone was wondering too, how we figured we said, and we've done this in years past, 95% collection rate. So the June 2024 collection rate year to date is 97.1%. June of 2023 is 97.2. So we're very similar to where we were last June. At the end of December 2023, we finish out the year at 97.9. 95%, it's a more conservative number because we did have a year in 2020 that was obviously 2020 was a bad year for everywhere. But we still eked out a 95.5% collection rate. So that's why we figured to use a 95% collection rate again for 2025.
I know some people have been asking questions throughout the presentation, but before we continue forward into discussion of the capital budget, are there any other questions about ops?
I've been asking all the questions, but it's just high level. Do you feel like this budget is well funded? And if there are gaps in funding or we're underfunded somewhere, where would that be? And I open up to the managers as well. Trees. Still even more than 100K. Okay, fair.
Yeah, Joel said it a few times, but the 2025 projected budget does not include any increases in staffing. With the exception of we're reflecting the number of hours for lifeguards that we have charged in years past. There are rules about how many lifeguards you need, and the number of lifeguards you need increases with the number of people that you're protecting. And so as our pool has become more popular, we also need to keep fully staffed. I'd also like to point out regarding lifeguards that we're very lucky to have achieved a full staff. Many of the other local pools have had to curtail their hours because they could not fill their lifeguard staffs. And I attribute our success not only to the fact that it's been fun to work here as a lifeguard, but also because we offer free certification. So we pay a couple $1,000s to have a certified Red Cross instructor come in right before the pool opens and do a class so that all the people who've applied to be a lifeguard can get their cert. And then they're very appreciative because it continues. I think it's for a 2-year. And by funding that training, we've been able to keep the pool open to the projected hours.
Yeah, and it's been great. The additional evening hours have been good. So if you could add staff, where would you add staff? Where do you think there's a need?
I think maintenance gets more requests than they can fulfill. And they're constantly, going back and forth between the various tasks they do. When they set up for the fair, they got behind on mowing.
Mhm.
At the beginning of the spring, it's all hands on deck to mow that initial outburst of grass. Am I right, Mike?
Fire, okay. Okay, yeah, I would agree with that, just observationally, yeah. Maintenance is, could use help. And that's in no way speaking negatively of the work that you're doing, but, yeah, I'd love to see more of an investment in maintenance going forward.
Because Firewise is another kind of task activity that we've gone to UDR for. And then we switched that to accounting for that in operations as well.
Yeah. Ray, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did refer back to the lifeguard and how we're able to staff. Isn't a good portion of those lifeguards students that live in the valley, high school students?
Yes, traditionally, it's primarily younger people from this community, although we also draw from Western Washington students. They come out this way, but it's primarily younger people who live in this community and grew up here.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that there is a possibility for the students who do live here to work at the pool. I think it's excellent program.
We've been super lucky, actually, to have continuity because we have lifeguards who are generally, it's their first year out, and we have head lifeguards who get paid an extra $1 an hour to be supervisors. And we have a head lifeguard who moved through all those phases and this is her last year and she's going on to medical school. So
Yeah, she's been here several years. She is great.
we're very lucky.
I have a question. In terms of where the budget doesn't indicate going up in staffing, are we fully staffed or do we have open? I used to call them requisitions, but do we have open jobs that people are applying for? Are you fully staffed at this point?
We have one job opening for what was recently redefined as a compliance manager.
Okay, thank you. And then I think that
Described as the environmental planner position. So, and it's somewhat similar in the job description.
thank you, Joanne. And then the other question, I think Karen kind of got me, asked it for me, but I'm wondering, being what we're fully staffed, is there any areas that we're at risk to running the association if you were to lose some of that staffing? I suppose maintenance is that's probably what it might be, but I'm just curious where we might be at risk.
Well, yeah, I think maintenance is our most volatile area, and especially since they are responsible for snow removal and cleanup after other weather events. Like snow is very dramatic and obvious. It piles up and we have to take it away and all that stuff. But there was a windstorm in February, and there was a windstorm in the previous fall that was significant enough to have many trees down and many branches. And I know Mike can bear me out. Did you not spend weeks picking up branches? Yeah, and the other thing that doesn't hit the radar either is that maintenance get called 24/7 when anything falls into the road or anything breaks. And so there are many evenings and weekends where Mike and or his staff respond to a call. And that with a limited number of people, if you have an extended event, can't sustain that level of effort, regardless of whether or not we had budget for it. So to have a very slim staff that covers a huge range of different tasks that they have to do. They plow, they maintain the pool pump, they patch drywall, they patch potholes. I mean, it's crazy the range of tasks that they have to handle. They maintain their own equipment, saving us lots of money and time. So that's the area where either an extended event that requires a lot of maintenance time and effort could deplete our staff so that we don't have bodies left who can continue to work, and would slow our ability to address whatever problem is occurring, or just that we can't get to everything that we'd like to do because of low levels of staff there.
We're very fortunate right now, too.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I can't hear what the gentleman's saying.
I was just saying, we're very fortunate to have some very good people. And to the point to your question, if we were to lose key people, that's where, we could be at risk, because you just don't replace quality people like that easily, that are that rounded and can do those types of tasks.
How many staff do you have? How many
5.
total? Like
Yeah.
Any seasonal?
No.
Okay. All right.
What kind of attrition do you experience, Mike?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What kind of attrition do you experience with the team?
In my tenure here, we've maintained staff. Prior to my arrival, I understand that there was a little bit of turmoil, but since I've been here, we've had 1 turnover, I believe.
Thank you. Well, I know that when I have seen social media posts about, there's a limb has fallen down, and there's a lot of those in the spring and winter, fall, it's always contact maintenance, so I can imagine what your call sheet must look like. Thank you.
This question's for Mike. In you're picking up an emergency stuff. So if I was to hit a deer in the park, would I call security or would I call maintenance?
That particular call to go to security, who would call wildlife control.
Have we had any casualties this year?
I am aware of a couple.
Okay. I gotta really go slow because these guys just jump out in front of me for no reason. I don't understand it, but they don't know where they're going.
I'd like to make a comment about the budget, and it's something that comes up every year, and a lot of the time it's overlooked, but the net profit from both the marina and from golf help offset the dues that have to be passed on to the membership. This year, it's a total of $8.91. So if you're thinking and you want to look at some of the numbers, figure out that if with at least operations, not capital, you'd be paying more money for your operational dues that are offset by these profits. And they have for, I believe, at least the last 3 years. And it's something that doesn't get mentioned very much.
Thank you, Linda. That's absolutely true. And that's why I tried to, or I took the time to highlight the income lines in that all department summary, because that's one place where you can very easily see all the different areas in which we do collect additional income over and above the dues that everyone pays. Any other questions before we move on to capital? I know that this is a lot of information. This evening, board members were provided with a packet that includes both the slides and large-scale copies of the number slides that were in the presentation. So you can look at those. Tomorrow morning, I will send out electronic copies, which in some ways are easier to navigate because you can make them bigger to see on your own screen. And hopefully you'll have time to review those things and come back with additional questions. There's time allotted in the agenda that's being planned for the August 8th meeting to ask more questions and have discussion around some of the choices that were made in preparing this budget.
Before we move on to the capital budget, can we take a 5-minute break for personal privilege to just get up and walk around a little bit and give Joel a chance to change gears?
I'll
Second that.
All in favor?
I don't vote.
Can we sit down again, please?
I wanted to visit with her. Oh. That felt good.
Mayor,
7:30.
Mayor Bear said to swim in the river.
Extra minutes. Boy, it felt good.
Okay. Just give AJ another minute.
These roads. Are you doing surf first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Surf? Thank you. We're waiting for.
Oh. Got it. Sorry. Can't see with these glasses. Everything beyond the table is a blur.
All right, we can call this meeting back to order at 7:31 PM.
So we just talked about operations. Now we're going to talk about capital. The capital budget is a complicated multi-year projection that models our current fund reserves, the obligated funds, our planned income, and budgeted expenses. It's different from the operating budget that we just looked at because the capital budget primarily looks forward, whereas the operating budget has many columns of data that talk about the past. And those are important differences. SVCA's Capital Repair Replacement Reserve Fund, or SURF, budget includes the association's facilities and equipment. The Roads Reserve Fund covers roads, bridges, and culverts. SVCA's capital funds include the mailbox reserve, but no spending is planned to draw on that account in 2025. We'll start our look at the capital budget for SURF. The projects listed on this slide are the current projects for 2024. And these are the projects that you have updates on monthly in my GM report. These projects account for $2,392,904 in obligated funds. And you can see that of the 17 projects that are here, the majority are completed. The remainder are in progress, except for 2 that are paused and are about to become unpaused. And those are Barn 8 refurbishment, and we'll talk about that later this evening, and the adult center furnace and water heater, which we will also talk about later this evening.
Joanne, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the presentation isn't up on the screen in the webinar. The camera's on. We're unable to see your slides.
Okay, well, I will remedy that. Thanks, Rob.
Showing on
Thank
my,
you.
Rob. It just should say review of 2024 capital projects serve. Kind of a purple on the right-hand side there. That's where we are.
Right.
Not showing, it's showing on my screen.
Awesome.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe it's on my end, if it's on your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying.
She's working on it.
Oh, it's working.
Oh, I can.
It's on the right one.
How about now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Bob, can you see it now?
I'm having trouble getting there, but okay.
No, I don't see it. I think maybe I'll log off and log back in. Sorry.
All right, so do we have the right thing showing?
Yes.
Excellent. This slide reviews the 2024 projects for roads. And you can see that while several of these are complete, many are in progress, and that's because this is the time of year to be out fixing roads. These projects account for $1,471,713 in obligated funds. This is an important slide, and I'm bringing it up before we dive into the individual line items of the SURF budget. This is a comparison of the 2024 and the 2025 SURF budgets. And as I said, it's a multi-year thing, our capital budgets. So, and you can see that it's offset by a year because it's a 10-year budget or a 10-year span of time that is planned for in the capital budget. So it makes sense that the 2025 budget would have an extra year in it. It goes all the way through 2020, 2034. However, if you compare the planned SURF expenses in the 2024 budget for years 2025 through 2033, now that's the only set of years that is in both budgets, it adds up to planned spending of $11,310,161. In the 2025 budget, that same period, the planned expenses have increased to $12,069,786. And that's a significant increase. It's an increase of almost $800,000. It's precisely $759,625. I think it's very important to point out that just under $700,000 of that difference comes from increased spending plan for 2025. So the out years look very similar, but 2025 is different. And why is that? It's because $688,000, $688,514 of expense was moved from 2024 to 2025. And that accounts for almost 99% of the increase in 2025 spending. So what got moved? Take a look at Barn 8 refurbishment. In October of 22, an initial amount of funding was approved for the design and permitting. That was $39,792. In September of 2023, the board approved $768,991 for the execution of the project that had been designed and permitted earlier that year. In November, staff came back and asked for $15,747 to replace the dance barn wall heaters. That all added up to $824,530 that was approved. Of that, we've spent $62,901, and the total remaining in funding that's obligated for Barn 8 refurbishment is $761,629. The proposed 2025 capital budget for SURF includes additional funds for the refurbishment of Barn 8. It includes 2024's additional $266,262 that was already budgeted but not spent, and 2025's covered walkway replacement at $216,320. The proposed total amount then budgeted for Barn 8 is $1,244,211. So it's important to know that the original amount budgeted has not been decreased. It's still there. Another carryover is the Turfcare building remodel. In the 2024 budget, $117,177 was allocated for repairs to the Turfcare building to be made in 2024. In January of 2024, the board approved $18,764.46 in funding to make HVAC repairs and to complete design and permitting for the rest of the remodel. In the 2025 budget, $141,994 have been allocated to complete the remaining repairs. So we're planning to complete those repairs in 2025. Similarly, the 2024 budget included funding for the clubhouse HVAC replacement, clubhouse interior renovations, and kitchen equipment replacements. Those three projects total $330,200. These projects were not completed, but funding was pulled forward into the 2025 budget. Funding of $317,904 is included in the 2025 budget for these projects. For the HVAC replacement, a certain amount of that $83,200 was obligated for the completion of design and permitting, and that's why the difference. I wanted to talk a little bit about marina fees because the way they're handled in 2025 is different than the way they were handled in 2024. The 2024 budget was prepared with the assumption that annual rental fees for wet slips would increase by $1,200 each, and that the $105,600 generated by this increase would be transferred to capital. In February of 2024, the board voted to approve increases of $600 to the wet slip fee for residents and $1,200 for non-residents. They also approved that $105,600 in funds be moved from operations to capital. These actions ensured that the expected capital funding contribution would be made in 2024. This year, more prior renters than usual decided not to renew their contracts for marina rentals. While all but 4 dry slips have now been rented, it required 4 or 6 weeks of administrative staff outreach to fill all of those open slips. This outcome suggests that the current rental fees are approaching a reasonable and fair market value, and that further increases would result in some slips not being filled, which would, of course, decrease revenues. I'll now turn it over to Joel to go through the actual SURF capital budget. You have to unshare and then reshare.
Yes.
See what I'm saying?
What do you guys see in your, I know,
Yes.
okay. You need this. I can't see.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. Well, we're seeing. There.
Even the original.
You can,
Yep.
Nope, it's not on the right thing.
This court should be finished. And agree. It'll be a
Guys seeing on Zoom, please.
We're seeing that.
Awesome. Sorry. There's a issue with the.
They're saying we've lost the sound on the YouTube.
I apologize for the break in the action here. We were experiencing a technical difficulty. The laptop was showing the PowerPoint in the room here, the meeting, the live meeting, but it was showing a different thing online. So we've now gotten it to show the same thing in both places, and we can continue on.
Thank you, Joanne.
Can someone just confirm that the sound is back on YouTube? Just got a text that it was. Oh, okay, thanks.
Now there's a chance that someone can see the numbers.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to see.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go over the SERP budget first, obviously, then we'll follow that with the roads, and we'll just go through this quickly, like we did with the operations budget. So, okay, with this capital planning spreadsheet, and what you're seeing right here, when the reserve study comes out, it's going to mirror this spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet, the calculations, the way that everything's being presented is going to be how it's going to, it's basically duplicating the reserve study, like the formulas behind the scenes. So this spreadsheet has been, and so we're using escalation rate of 4%. That's what we used in reserve study last year before. We'll do it again for the 2025 budget year. That's a good conservative number to use. And you'll see, so we'll just start out, we'll skip over the first line, line 13. I'm not going to go through every single one of these lines. I'm just saying this. Let's look at the Barn 8 covered bridge. We'll look at that. This 18, row 18 right here. Oh, well, I guess you hit the columns anyway, so. So there's some hidden columns here, but basically how these spreadsheets work is last year, if you looked at last year's 10-year capital plan, you'll see the very far left column, had a cost estimate. And then right next to that was a cost estimate year. So last year would have said 2024 cost estimate year. So these columns happen to be hidden on this particular spreadsheet on this computer. But so the spreadsheet for the 2025 budget year, it starts out by taking the cost estimate from the 2024 spreadsheet, then immediately tacking on a 4% inflation rate to that. And then that becomes our 2025 number that we work with. And then every single time that something gets delayed or it's scheduled to be, like in this case in 2028 for this main pool ADA lift, there's a good example to where, so the cost estimate year, the cost estimate in year 2025 to get to 2028, then it'll tack on 4%, push it to 2026, another 4% for 2027, then another 4% to get to 2028. So every time something moves from one column to the next, it's going up by 4%, and it's cumulative, obviously. So if I went, like I said, if I went from 2025 to 2027, then I'd go up 4% to get to 2026, and it'd go up another 4% to get to 2027. So we'll just quickly just run through this. The way that this spreadsheet is put together is obviously this takes into account, we'll just look at this January 1 carryover. right here, this 1,411,259. So that is taking into account basically, like if you think of like the last time that I presented financial statements last month, so I did the April financial statements. Then the April financial statements, there's a cash reserve table in there, and the reserve column basically has all the money that has come in through the year, and then all of our obligated expenditures that the board has approved, and then we have kind of our projected dues. And then what I'm getting at is there will be a December 31 balance projected at that point, cash ending for 2024. So basically, I can start with that number and then start factoring in everything in 2023 and 2024 to make just, basically I'm accounting for everything that's been obligated in 2023 or 2024 into this beginning January 1 carryover. So long story short, January 1 carryover assumes that everything that you see in 2023 and 2024, it's either gone to the board already or it's as good as going to the board. So it's all factored in. And then 2025, then you have this beginning balance. Then obviously you have the dues. This is the dues of that 7% increase for SURF. And estimated interest income 6,000. That's a conservative number. We get more interest in this, obviously. But since these total balances will change over the years, I just left it at 6,000 across the board. And then we have this previous years. That's that $600,000 amount. This January 1 carryover is actually after the $600,000 amount carryover. And then this 600,000 puts it back just for computational purposes. Then you have your total expected revenue or the amount of money you have to work with in 2025. And then it starts subtracting away all of these approved projects. And then, so we have 1,853,994 projected expenses in 2025. And that's subtracted away from that top line revenue. And then it takes away again that $600,000 carryover. And then that's how much we can expect to have in the SURF balance at the end of 2025 if everything went according to plan. Obviously, our cash balance is higher than this 937 because we still have that $600,000 amount, that carryover amount that we don't want to fall below. So, so this is repeated from column to column. And then obviously when we do this capital planning, this is where the managers really come in is, for them to go over, actually all of them received these spreadsheets, like if we back up here a couple of months ago, and then they go over all of their fixed assets that they have. And then they look at the condition of the fixed assets and compared to the spreadsheet. And like, for example, if something was listed to be replaced in, we'll just make this up, in 2029, does this thing look like it could make it until 2029? And then, well, no, not really. Maybe it should be replaced in 2027. Then we could move it in to 2027, or even the opposite could happen, that this is in fantastic shape, but this could wait until 2030. Then it could be pushed out to 2030. Keep in mind, whenever anything is pushed out, it's not you don't get something for nothing, meaning so 4% gets tacked onto that when it gets pushed out any individual year. If it gets pulled in, the opposite happens, obviously. But that's basically what's going on here with working with the management team and them going over their assets, their fixed assets, and the condition of the assets and their need level of what needs to be replaced or repaired. And or sometimes something's added. And we've also removed things. So there are a couple of vehicles on here. Mike said to flat out remove them. We're not going to replace them. So that's basically the process of the capital planning. Then obviously we do this at a 10-year kind of level. So in this case, now we're looking at 2025 through 2034. That's the 10-year span to look at. Now, normally I would hide like the 2023 column in this case, but since Joanne went over, certain things that affected the 2024 balance in 2023, I left this one so you could see it. So you could see how maybe something went from one year to the other between 2023 and 2024. So that's why you're also seeing 2023. But just quickly, just going down through this, you can see like, so for Barn 8, obviously Joanne already went over Barn 8, but 2024, you see the covered bridge that was originally scheduled for, I believe, 2023. So This one's now scheduled to be done. It obviously won't be done this year in 2024, so it'll be done in 2025 at this point. So it was pushed, it was originally 200,000 here in 2023. So here's a good example where in 2023 it was 200,000. And so you see the penalty that it took to get it to 2025. So it became $216,320. And that's because 4% got tacked onto it for it to go to 2024. And then the formulas tack on another 4% to go to 2025. So you see how it becomes more expensive. And that's obviously to simulate inflation or the possibility of inflation affecting the purchase of a capital asset. Now, we'll just basically focus on this 2025 column for now, but you can see, and of course, anyone can go through it. Now, we did add a few things on here for the Welcome Center. We're painting. There's one of the items that's added for the Welcome Center. You'll see the club vac HVAC 20-ton, 61,000.
So that's reflecting the remainder of the originally budgeted funds that we're retaining or pulling forward into 2025. So, because that's when the project will get executed. I mentioned earlier on my slide the clubhouse renovations. By moving out from 2024, the money that was scheduled for the 19th hole renovation at end of lease, the administrative space renovation at end of lease, and the restaurant renovation. You can see that those numbers increased from what had been scheduled or budgeted in 2024. If you flip down to the next page, you can see all of the Turfcare expenses. And by adding 4% to that is how we come up with the 141,994. One more, and we have equipment. You can see that the kitchen equipment in the clubhouse was scheduled for potential replacement in 2024. That did not occur, so those monies were pulled forward into 2025, and that accounts for another bit of the increase in 2025 spending. In terms of items that were just straight out added to 2024, there were three entries. One is for signs, directional signs. What? I'll figure it out when I find it. Might be under equipment.
Directional signs for
Yeah.
25.
25 and then
The last page of the middle of the page.
Yeah, there's a zero-turn mower on row 286 that was added. That's for maintenance. Their mower died. And they were looking for parts, but wanted a replacement for next year. That was 25,000. And still haven't found those directions. Oh, there it is. Lines 302 and 303 in 2025. Marina directional signage, 15,000. There's a lot of signs at the marina, and there are signs that need to be replaced, and there are signs that are missing to help people understand how to offload boats, where the different amenities are, where to park, and everything else. Signs are excruciatingly expensive. The line 303 gate 2 directional signage, that's $20,000 to replace the tombstone sign that used to be used by what was the name of that place? That used to own the welcome center?
Sunmark.
What is it called?
Sunmark.
Sunmark. Yeah, that old tombstone that the granite is now falling off of. We need to resurface that and add signing not only for Sudden Valley, but also for our tenants. El Agave should have a sign there, as should the library and other tenants. So that signage. And then additionally, there's a lot of other directional signage, for example, on Marigold, as you get pointed to AMP and Beach and the rec center. And then the rec center has signage down to drive people to those very popular amenities. Additional signage, there's a little bit of money in there to upgrade it. But that was literally all that we added. As Joel alluded to, we took out replacing the Honda Element. That's line 296 that had originally been scheduled for replacement in 2025. We took that off.
And that row won't correspond to this sheet since she's looking at an original.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually cut and pasted this together. The original cut and paste. And anyway, there were more than a dozen different moves that we had here, but they all balanced out. And literally, those three things that I just said were the only things that were added. And we attempted to mitigate those additions by taking off the replacement of the Honda Element, and in the following year, the replacement of the security vehicle, the secondary security vehicle, that little CRV that they drive around. So we're putting all our eggs in one basket for the single Chevy Colorado that security drives around. And then the other changes were just pulling unpaid and uncompleted projects from 2024 and 2023 in some cases into 2025, as we discussed in the slides. Of concern is the fact that if you look at the very bottom line, here, our reserves are lower than we would like them to be. But it's important to remember that it's the bottom line that you see there in white is actually augmented by 600,000 in the top, in the line right above it. That's the mandatory holdback that is part of board policy to say you can never spend that 600,000. And then, so whatever is left at the bottom is in addition to that 600,000.
Yeah, so like 2029, here's an easy one to see here in 2029. So that's 773,854. That's kind of, so we don't have this $600,000 requirement to not drop below. So that's this bold, big, the larger, bolder number here is that's the actual cash balance. This 173,854 is after that $600,000 that we would not want to drop below.
Yeah. So my question, when we moved all this stuff around and looked at the original result, my question was, well, I get that we're moving stuff from 24 to 2025, but we didn't spend that money in 2024. So shouldn't our reserve be bigger? So then I went back and I looked at everything we did in 2024, and across the board, projects were coming in significantly higher than budgeted. Full of key examples. Tennis court resurfacing. That has ended up being $157,840 more than was originally budgeted. Big and small, the numbers add up. Painting was $1,300 more, painting the clubhouse. We pulled forward the asphalt cart path repairs. That was an extra $54,000 in 2024 that hadn't been budgeted. So we didn't spend it on some of these bigger projects, but we spent it on the other ones. And so the reserves were depleted, and we still had those other repairs to do. So the moral of the story is, going forward, I think we need to expect that projects are going to continue to come in priced higher than this analysis is figuring the numbers. We have had 4% inflation rates from year over year for a long time. That's the standard. That's how you do it. Well, we had more than 4% inflation in some of those past years. And it's catching up to us. It's cumulative.
Yes.
And so if it's concerning to the board that the reserves are lower, the way to remedy that is to take projects off. And there are many potential choices to be made here, but they all have consequences. And I would suggest that if there is concern that we pick the bigger projects and not look at the smaller items, because it's not those smaller, taking off a $5,000 this or a $20,000 that is not going to make a big difference. So, sorry to be the voice of doom and gloom. However, I will say that by increasing dues by the 7% and ensuring that it was 7% on the capital contribution as well, before we added that in, we actually had negative reserves. So there's not a lot of room here is the message.
I don't think it's doom and gloom, Joanne. I think you're just being, these are just the facts. This is just the math and how it works out. And I appreciate the honesty about where we are. There's three options that you have is, I mean, yes, you can take projects off. You can, which honestly also usually means disposing of assets, getting rid of things. So like we did with the rotunda, the campground. The other is to increase funding like we're doing this year and to continue that. Our reserve study says right there in the first introduction pages, they recommend every year keeping up with inflation. So not a one and done or a one every 10 years, but every year keeping up with inflation. He also recommends 70% funded. That $173,000 is probably going to be 2% funded. It's going to be very, very low. The third thing we can do that we have been doing for probably 40 years is deferring projects. And we're still in there, but if we get to a point where we are higher funded than 20% or 1% or whatever it is, then these projects that come in more expensive don't throw off the project plan for the next years and we can absorb some of those things. I think what is it? Over 50% is considered low risk, 35% considered low risk for special assessment. Remember, Joel? There's kind of a tiered system. It's like 0 to 35 is high risk for special assessment, 35 to 50 or 70 is low risk. But our reserve study specialist recommends 70%, and previous ones have said similar, specifically because our infrastructure is so old. So I think we need to look at that going forward. Doesn't change anything for the 2025 budget. We're at the max. But I think we need to looking forward.
There's another consideration, and it doesn't apply so much to surf, but it certainly does to roads. You can accept a reasonable amount of risk if the asset that suffers an emergency, and has to be repaired in advance of the planned funding. Okay, so you go without a pool for a year. It's unfortunate, but you can do that. It's not gonna, but if a road goes, bridge goes, and we didn't have the funding lined up to replace that, you couldn't wait. There would have to be a special assessment, and there would be a significant potential inconvenience. So if you look at the kind of infrastructure items that are in our capital planning, they're required for people to get to their homes and to live safely in their homes. It's the roads, right? So making sure that at least the roads budget is funded more robustly would probably be a long-term strategy for the association to pursue.
I do also have to say that when the dues for the contribution for capital and roads was originally determined in 2020, it was before we owned the Welcome Center and we had a significant amount of cash sitting in a reserve holding fund. So we have fewer dollars available now and more assets to maintain. So that's another thing that we have to consider going forward. And we don't have all the components for the Welcome Center even in here too. So if something comes up, siding or windows or something need to be repaired, those are 0% funded currently. So there's a lot to consider in this, particularly looking forward out 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and making sure that we can pay for it.
Just to add to that comment, we did add line items for the Welcome Center roof, the Welcome Center building siding repair,
Perfect.
and Welcome Center door window replacement, but the current components of the Welcome Center are deemed to have longer than a 10-year lifespan left. So for the longer term reserve study, they are in there, but they're not showing up in this 10-year view.
You can see those basically.
Yeah, I see them now. Thank you.
Yeah, are there any questions on surf before we go forward to roads?
Ooh, you got one from me here. So I'm looking at line number 17. And it's the barn 8 exterior envelope, and it's moved, it's in 23, it's in 24. It's not been moved forward to 25. It's blank.
Yeah, so the way that worked out was Joel has to estimate and sort of, I'm not going to say guess, an educated guess about what additional funds might be obligated from the 2024 budget by the board in the remaining months of 2024. And the status of that project is that, and we'll talk about it later in the meeting as an agenda item, but the board had directed me to work with our capital projects manager to get a quote on structural evaluation, and we're bringing that back. So that has a cost to it. We may pursue additional work in order to move this project forward once that study, that evaluation is completed. And so we left the original 821,000, I think, that had been planned.
Well, in combination
I
with.
think
the-
761's left.
Yeah, so that's what we moved.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah, because there's nothing there in 2025.
Well, it's in
That's why-
2024.
Okay, I know, I see it there, but you had said in your prior presentation that that's what was being moved forward into 25, and I'm just
Right,
looking.
well, it's actually in 24. That's why I didn't, it's not included in this amount. It's not included in.
Okay,
So anyway, yeah, this stuff is really complicated. But the good news is, we don't have to, if we are accepting of those lower reserve balances at the end of each year, we do not have to make any difficult decisions. So it's the
Can,
good news.
can I ask a question? I'm looking at this spreadsheet, sorry, the audience can't see, but it's the comparison of the 24 and 25 SURF budgets. And I appreciate this analysis a lot, that you put that together to compare. And Joel, you mentioned that like the managers went through and they looked at all the assets. So if I look through this, I'm comparing like 26 and 27, those numbers do actually change. But so are you saying that any changes that were made, moving things backward or forward, were based on a look at that particular asset, and we're not just kind of moving things to balance things out? Was it really a specific asset changes?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what we did. And that's why I bothered to describe it up front, because every asset, we identify where it is. In the case of a building, it's not too hard, but we have a lot of portable assets, trucks and tools and, things like that. And there were items on here that, for example, our turf superintendent, Greg, took a look at and said, I see that these are planned to be replaced in 8 years. That's old technology. We don't need that. Instead, we're using these mowers.
Okay.
And I can show you after the meeting. I can't show everyone in the community this, but this spreadsheet actually records every single change and its impact on the totals for each year.
So then they're able to, within pretty good reasonableness, even look 8 to 10 years. I guess that's kind of my question, is like me not managing facilities or equipment at all. I'm thinking like, well, how would you know 8 to 10 years out how long something might be? Because I was kind of surprised to see some changes in those further out years, but to the extent that there were changes, it was based on pretty good estimate of and knowledge of that equipment or that project.
Gentlemen, want to respond to that?
Yeah, it depends on the asset, but some things you can.
Okay.
And there were some examples of some things that not moved too far out, there was a lot easier.
Uh-huh.
Like if you have, a pickup with 42,000 miles on it and good condition, that it's gonna last or should last,
Okay.
significantly more.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If you have a fleet of some things, you can kind of compare to other things in the fleet. Okay. My second question on that is then, so if the reserve study mirrors this and you change the year in this, then it will change the remaining useful life in the reserve study, correct? So it will change that
Oh,
calculation.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So remaining useful life in the reserve study is not, or even just useful life is maybe not what you'd think of like from accounting standard where there's just a standard, a car is 5 years or whatever. This is a little bit more subjective in that we are putting our own knowledge and estimates into it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because like, for example, we could get a truck, you know, and then of course from an accounting standpoint, we'll just depreciate that over
Right.
5 to 7 years regardless.
Yeah. So when you do depreciation on the balance sheet or whatever, you're doing the accounting
That's
standard
right.
remaining
Yeah.
useful life, but the reserve study does not reflect that same date.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could, or it might not, depending on like, well, we haven't even used this truck, you know, like this
Yeah.
can easily last another year. So then,
Yeah.
then the useful life could be bumped out a year on the reserve study.
Okay.
You know, a really good example of that is the large, was it an excavator or a front loader? I've forgotten what it's called. It's the 420E that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So last year, it was a complicated financial transaction. We, in December of 2022, I guess, there was a fire in the cab and that asset, needed to be repaired or it was useless. So the insurance company compensated us for the depreciated value that they estimated because it's not like a home, it's not like your home insurance, right? Or your car insurance where you get replacement value. It was the actual value lost. That's the kind of policy we have. So we made the case after doing the math that the value of the excavator was more than they were estimating it to be, the insurance company, because even though it was so old, it had many fewer hours on it. And a lot of our equipment has hour meters. So yeah, a car has mileage, but you know, a tractor has an hour meter and all that other, a lot of the other equipment has as well. So we determined that the investment made sense to us because an objective sort of theoretical evaluation of that asset's worth did not match with the I can look at it, I can evaluate it. It, you know, to buy something similar would be way more expensive than simply fixing this. So it's a very customized calculation, and that's what SURF represents.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
You guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Another example is like our bucket truck, for example. It's, you know, very needed and useful, but it's low hours.
Okay.
And we're lucky enough to right now have a very good mechanic on staff
Yeah.
that can evaluate those things. So that was very helpful.
So you would still say it's very objective. It's just not from an accounting standard where it's like 5 years, whatever, but it's a more detailed look at it based on hours or usage or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions on SURF?
Oh, me, but I think it's a question for Mike. What's the maintenance number 16, 3,500? Just, it's one of the big trucks.
What row is that?
It's row 270. For 56,243 for next year. I just wondered if it's one of our Silverados that we have. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, the 3,500 would be a 1-ton truck.
Is it 1 ton?
Below row 270, because that spreadsheet's old.
Oh, I see. Just was wondering what it was. It's like some of this stuff, it says whether it's Silverado or, you know, is it a truck? Is it? Answers the question.
Any other questions?
Joy.
Rick?
So Joel, you said these projections are based on the proposed increase for 25, but no other increases beyond that? Did I hear you say that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So it also looks like we have quite a large loan repayment.
Yeah.
Out for about 8, 9 years, whatever that is.
Yep.
And that's where, too bad it doesn't stop a year or two earlier, 'cause we'd avoid that dip down at 173 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That sort of loan payment, I've pointed this out before in years past, but you'll see how it's $333,039 until you get to year 2028, then it drops down. Then 2030, obviously, it goes way altogether. But I don't know if people remember, but back in for the Welcome Center purchase, when we took out this SURF loan, there was also a board resolution for us to pay more on it through until the kind of earlier part of 2028, maybe July or something of 2028. And that was to simulate kind of the payoff of the original SURF loan by the end of that loan at that time. Meaning that original 2016 SURF loan would have been done in 2028. So that's to simulate accomplishing that same objective.
The board has also in the past used excess operations surplus or net income to pay down the loan. That was in 2020, I believe, Linda, right?
2020, 2021 in there.
Yeah. So that's another option that's available when we have surplus at the end of a fiscal year to put that money to work somehow by paying down the loan, and then it frees up capital in the future.
Joel, I have a question. Have we gotten the latest, because you said that the latest reserve study that we were supposed to get this year according to the budget calendar that we were supposed to have, I think in June yeah. Have we received that and it's just not been posted online, or is it online already?
No, actually, the reserve study, now that I hope these numbers are, well, they are. I mean, unless we make any sort of big changes, but doesn't seem like it. But now basically at this point, we can take this information and update the reserve study.
Okay, I just like all the comments that he puts in there about funding and stuff, depending on what's there. Because like Karen said, there's some of that where every year he has us increasing our SURF to make sure we're staying current and we're not falling further behind.
And those are, of course, those are typical tables that they put in every reserve study, but we'll, we won't take that table.
What beats not putting any extra in there?
Yeah, the previous 2 years, he has in every single funding scenario has built into it a 3 to 4% increase. So what made it a little bit difficult to see was if we are not planning, or if we wanted to see what it would look like without increases, which I think is also a good view. But it sounds like you said we might have that view this year where we'll have one of the funding recommendations that doesn't have the built-in increase.
I mean, we're wanting to show no increase whatsoever beyond the 7% this year. I mean, for 2020.
Yeah. Because the previous years, every funding scenario has shown an increase.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that will be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, we can continue on to roads.
Sure can.
So that we don't screw up the display again, I'm going to simply read you the slide. That was quite nice, very beautiful. And this is to remind everyone about SVCA's 10-year roads and drainage plan. In February of 2023, the board awarded a contract to Impact Design for the development of a 10-year maintenance plan for SVCA's roads, culverts, and bridges. This comprehensive plan was presented to the board in January of 24. The plan includes a prioritized list of projects by year, along with estimates of the cost of each project. The 2025 roads capital budget aligns exactly with the recommendations made by Impact Design in the 10-year plan, with 3 exceptions. We had in an out year, I think 2031, a budget deficit, and to get around that budget deficit, we spoke with Tyler Andrews and determined that 3 of the planned overlays could be moved out 2 years to avert a deficit.
Okay, so the good thing is roads, it's actually, I think this is easier than SURF, because like Joanne said, this mirrors the Impact roads plan that we received, the 10-year roads plan. Of course, now this top part is just, you'll see we have on-call engineering budget in here, which we always do. The bridge inspections here, line so roads 14 right here. Then I also, those 5-year programmatic permits, now these are kind of new line items, but I built these now into the spreadsheet, the 15,000. So it shows up now every 5 years. And then we have the capital improvement plan that Impact did for us. And you'll see it's up for another renewal in 2028 where they'll redo this plan. And then it'll be done again in 2033 as well. So, and then when you get down into this, you'll see 2024 items right here. You'll see Cold Spring drainage construction for 2024, the Aries E access bridge, Deer Run Lane asphalt overlay. These are all planned things for 2024. And then when you really start to get into 2025, that's where you're now seeing the 10-year capital plan or the 10-year roads plan for an Impact. And there are just 3 exceptions that Joanne mentioned.
Autumn Vista, Holly Ridge, and
So it'll be rows 43, 44, and 45. These were originally scheduled to be done in 2030 on the plan. Now, so it's the year 2030 that we were running into a negative. And so when we met with Tyler, when we were going over this plan, of course, we asked him if any road overlays looked like they could, it wouldn't be a problem to move them. And then he actually said quickly, these 3 that could easily be moved to 2034. That wouldn't cause any sort of a problem.
we and Tyler, everyone felt comfortable about that because the plan is scheduled to be re-upped. So road inspections would occur just as they did last time, culvert inspections. An update would be made to the database and a reassessment of the prioritization of repairs would be made after 5 years. So at that point, we would be much closer in time to when those repairs were planned and they could be appropriately timed.
Up here also in this top section, before you get into the culverts, but up here is basically the major road work. And you will see I put any culvert in here that also involved a bridge as well. So you'll see culverts and bridges that are, one project combined up into this section as well.
Joel, we can't see the spreadsheet.
You have to share it.
Oh,
That'll be in 5 minutes. So, last year's budget was also prepared using a memo from Impact Design regarding which roads were prioritized and which culverts were prioritized for repair in 2025. But the memo that was prepared by Impact Design, they prepared that significantly before they finalized the full plan. And so that memo did not include bridges. And when we got the full plan in January, it included bridges. And so by adding the bridges to the previous information that had been shared, that's why the 2025 roads budget is different than the 2024 budget. And there is a lack of funding in out years. If we had not added the increased dues amount, you would see negative numbers, very much more. You would see negative numbers for roads.
yeah.
At least 2 of those bridges were in previous reserve studies for 2024 and 2028. And then I think there were 2, culvert to bridge. We can go about, anyway, some of them were in there. And then they got pushed out further. And then, like you said, got dropped because of the memo. But that's why I was asking some of the questions about how changes are made to projects, because if things are just getting kind of pushed out, we just don't have the visibility to them anymore. And so I think if those had stayed in, if the one had stayed in 2024 last year, it probably would have thought, oh, hey, but this doesn't seem right based on this memo because we have this bridge replacement. So anyway, but this looks like a good plan. I do have one question, and that is, I thought, and Linda, you might help me out here. I thought in the previous reserve study, I don't know if it was in the 10-year roads plan, but the roads reserve study assumed resurfacing all roads on like a rotating 7-year plan. Does that seem familiar to you or not?
I'd have to go back and
Okay.
look at impacts, that really complete thing they gave us. That's where I figured out we were missing $5 million worth of bridges.
Okay, well, I'm talking about from,
Yeah, and
For,
I
like,
always, I thought too that there's supposed to be an amount almost every year, or every other year that covers resurfacing.
yeah, well, these have
many.
specific roads. And I thought it was more general before, but it was just road overlay every year. So am I understanding that this is not every road, but it's just these specific roads that will be done? So we won't expect over the 10 years that every road will have an overlay done.
You're absolutely right in calling out the difference between the previous approach and the new approach to the roads management plan,
Mhm.
because of the way that impact design conducted that study. Previously, while the engineers did go out and look at some of the roadways, their recommendations were to spend X dollars doing X percent
Mhm.
of the roads, and they left it up to us to determine the most in need of those repairs. And this was all reported to me because it predates my time here at the association. But Impact Design literally walked every foot of road that we have, inspected it, made detailed notes about its condition. They did the same for the culverts. They found during that process an additional amount of culverts, which are now mapped. We did a project in preparation for that inspection to clean out culverts. After the inspection was completed, we spent another large amount of money to upgrade the ditches surrounding those culverts to make sure that there was positive drainage. So the outcome of that significant investment in examining our infrastructure was to get exactly what we have now, a very specific, very much more accurate understanding of what investments need to be made to maintain the road system.
It's much clearer, much more like the surf
Correct.
one now, where you can look at specific projects and know what's going on.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, I am not by any means an expert in roads, but we do have one on the board who can comment on this. But my understanding is that this is a much better position for the association to be in, to have specific information instead of a generalized recommendation.
One thing I'll say about the roads, what you see here on this 10-year plan is, the good thing about this is I didn't pull any punches with these numbers, meaning from impact design. So we got this study in February, I want to say. Is that right?
January.
January. Okay,
This year.
so early 2024 is when we got the study. So now here, we'll look at culvert 24, this one right here, line 36, just so you can see. Okay, so this is year 2027 for culvert 24. Then you'll see the 2025 cost estimate is 918,383. Well, on the impact study, it said for 2027, 883,060. So for me, it's like, okay, well then that's the amount. Obviously, this report is January 2024. I will deem that that's the cost in January 2024. So then when it gets into this spreadsheet, then the first thing it does is we'll bump it up 4% just to say, here's the cost of January 1, 2025. So now it becomes 918,383. And then it gets pushed out a couple of years at 4% per year to 2027. Now it's 993,323. So this spreadsheet is more conservative, so to speak, in terms of factoring in that this could be more expensive than what that study said.
I think the impact indicated also that the numbers that they used, even for the numbers they projected out beyond 2023 and 24, had no escalation in them. They were just at either a 2023 or a 2024 rate.
Right. It was a current rate, which is why Joel did that extra step.
Yeah, so these are all, the escalation rates applied to all these numbers, even to the original numbers, 4% off the top just to get it to the 2025 January number.
It looks like too, when I look at the 2025 stuff, when we were talking about overlays, that in a way they've gone to actual areas like Appaloosa Court, Yearling Place, but they haven't, it's not like doing so many feet or so many, miles of like Polo Park, but it looks like we're going into some of the smaller areas where they're resurfacing. Just a note. I'm gonna go back and see why there's nothing about just general overlay, for each year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go look. It's all there.
This road plan also has all the usual lines like pothole repairs that you see
Yep.
repeating.
CVC too.
Yeah, CVC, fast response for unforeseen drainage issues, flooding and stuff like that. And what I did too with this road plan is, instead of just saying, one lump sum amount, 2026 culvert work, I decided to go ahead and list every single culvert individually with their address in case anyone was curious in what year maybe a culvert next to them would be done. So this is the one big line item here in culverts, the box culvert that you see for close to 595,000, 2026. But basically you'll see every single culvert that's planned to be done in this 10-year impact design roads plan is listed individually. Yeah,
Will you
individually.
scroll down to the bottom so we can see the
Oh, yeah.
balances?
And there's the CVC that Linda, that line.
Oh,
And
AJ, do you use similar planning tools at work like that? Like, what is the escalation that you guys are using? Is it 4%? Is it less, higher? Or is that not your area?
It's gonna change depending upon your project that you're gonna put together an estimate. Project specific. It's not so general.
Yeah, I was just
You know,
thinking,
Yeah, like.
so you're
I'm
looking,
not exactly sure what you're trying to get at, but
I'm just thinking if you have something similar for the county where you're looking, 3, 4, 5 years out or more, are you building escalation in that, or you're just looking project specific?
I mean, we have a 6-year STIP that we do at the county, and those projects that I guess that are out 3, 4, in like years 4, 5, and 6 or whatever, a lot of times it's just planning level estimates.
Okay.
Those numbers change, unlike this, we evaluate our 6-year program yearly, whereas we're evaluating ours every 5 years, which I think is reasonable considering we don't hire, have engineers on staff to do that, but.
So you don't have like a standard, we just build in, X% inflation like we do in this? I just,
No, you would look at the project, what
Okay.
is it, and what do we think it would.
What are
cost
prevailing
out there,
costs?
I mean, anything you would put a cost estimate together in today's dollars, you can't put a cost estimate together for future dollars, that's impossible. You're just
Wow.
making a ton of
Assumptions.
yeah,
may or may not, so you then, yeah, I mean, 2.5% is the pretty typical escalation in my experience.
Okay.
From seeing like, if we do like an alternatives analysis on an intersection to look at like roundabout versus signal or something like that, we would estimate all that out in future or current dollars and then, have like, some sort of escalation to figure out what we think it'll cost
Yeah.
the year we're gonna build it.
yeah, which is essentially what this is, and we picked 4. I was just wanting to compare, like, what is the county using? Is it 4? Is it 2? Is it?
A lot of our future projects I don't think are super detailed
Okay.
either. They're very much placeholders to try to secure funds because if we don't have projects on the STIP, you can't get federal or state funding for them. So like, because they basically say you're not serious about the project.
Okay.
It's not even on your plan. So a lot of stuff, outside of like, a bridge for us takes 3, 4 years to design and permit and all that stuff. So like, you know,
Yep.
those projects will have like more exact dollar amounts for construction in future years or whatever, but you know, yeah.
Okay.
Rick? Rick's got a question for you, Joel.
Yeah, sorry.
With our recent ACC changes in regards to driveway culverts, those aren't included in this, right?
No, we've never had line items for the maintenance of driveway culverts. It was situationally driven. If there was a blockage, and the blockage in the culvert was causing water to flow across the roadway or into someone's home, then it would be addressed on an as-needed basis.
Actually, Karen, for years past, the reserve studies used to use, I want to see if it was around a 2.5% inflation.
We
rate.
did, yeah.
But
Now it's more.
then I think it was around 2022 or so that we started using a 4%.
I think it was when we switched to the new, I mean, that might have been just coincidence, but when we switched to the new company, I think it switched to
Well, actually, because
4%.
I can see on one of the prior reserve studies.
Or which went even?
Went, it was 4% in 2022.
Oh, okay. So we've been
and
using 4
that
for a
seems to be
while.
about right around that
Mhm.
time, it was bumped up.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, AJ?
So all the identified culverts that need to be replaced as bridges, are they shown?
Yeah.
You said they're shown up here.
Yeah,
Is
they're
that
shown
all
up.
of them?
Yeah,
Or is
anyone that
there
involved.
any other culverts in the big list that,
Yeah, there's the box culvert. In
Yeah.
2020.
It's gonna
Yes,
be
but
like
that
that
happened
one
now.
that's on Polo Park, is it, that we looked at recently?
That's culvert 25
those are,
with the box.
so these are the culverts due to fish passage that are gonna become bridges. And that's like the exhaustive list of them.
Yeah. I actually toyed with the idea of throwing that one up there too, with the big culverts with the bridges as well.
So I think that we've gone through a lot of information. It's a little overwhelming. It covers a lot of ground in terms of expertise and just trying to understand the different factors that went into moving something or increasing the cost or decreasing the cost of something in the budgeting process. So it's a lot to absorb. I do want to say that we're extremely sensitive to the fact that it's not just numbers on a page. It's dollars coming out of people's pockets. And in response to the two homeowners who came here this evening to urge us to rein in the increases, I would say that there is not a lot to cut out of here. And given that between the years of 2020 and 2025, the real increase in dues is 8.3%. And during that same period, prices have increased by more than 21%. So that the budget dollars that we're allocating now actually have 16% less purchasing power than they did in 2020. So we're actually dealing with, even though the numbers are larger in terms of the value of what those dollars can purchase, we're purchasing less. It is concerning to see the reserves dip low. But it's also necessary to remember that future increases of dues are not represented in this analysis. So a more modest increase of 2 or 3% applied equally across operations and capital next year would be, or even the following year, that would end up contributing to improving the reserves. However, the reserves are low. So there are many important decisions, I think, to be made, and you have to balance practicality with the desire to keep the dues at a reasonable amount.
Yeah, I'll say it real quick before I close this road capital project. spreadsheet is, okay, so one other line item that is on here is the street signs and pavement marking repairs for 30,000 in 2025. So that's not on the 10-year roads plan. That's also an additional line item that we added on. But that's really the only other one.
And the purpose for that is to make sure that we have money to make incidental repairs to the roadways to maintain them. Because when there's a break in the surface, it can easily spread, whereas if you immediately patch it, it's less likely to spread and you have a better road surface for a longer time. So the continued investment in that routine maintenance is important. Are there any other questions or comments? Great. Back to you, Taimi.
All right, that brings us to item 6, new business. The first is 6A, capital request, fence replacement and RV storage rehab. Purpose to request funding and contract award for replacing fencing at the adult center, Area Z RV storage site, Turfcare maintenance shop, and to refurbish the Area Z RV site. The 2024 capital budget includes funding to replace fencing at the adult center, Area Z RV storage site, and Turfcare maintenance shop. Total combined budget for all 3 fencing projects is $56,251. There is an additional $15,600 allocated for refurbishment of the Area Z storage site for a total of $71,851. The chain link fence at the adult center has been encroached upon by arborvitae trees and needs replacement. The arborvitae trees were evaluated by a certified arborist and deemed to be healthy. Arborist's recommendation is to install a new fence about 5 feet inside the existing fence to avoid damaging the root structure of the trees. The old fence would be removed with underground portions left in place. The new fence would have privacy slats like the existing fence and include a new gate to allow safer access to the quiet pool pump room. The project would be scheduled to be completed in September upon closure of the adult pool. The existing fence around the Area Z RV storage is made up of temporary fence panels and has been repaired in various places. The fence would be replaced with a permanent chain link fence and 3-strand barbed wire at the top for security. In conjunction with the fence replacement, the RV storage area would be graded, lines painted, and spaces numbered to clearly identify each space. The existing fence at the Turfcare maintenance shop is a dilapidated wooden fence that needs to be replaced. The preferred option is to replace it with a chain link fence for longevity and lower maintenance costs. The new fence would include privacy slats and be installed in the same location as the existing fence. For economy of scale, all 3 fencing projects were combined and 9 vendors were contacted for quotes. 3 vendors provided proposals. The preferred option is to select C&P Fencing, who provided the lowest quote. Refurbishment of the RV storage area is a relatively straightforward project, and the preferred option is to complete this work with SVCA staff and by utilizing SVCA's established on-call contractor list. This will provide the flexibility needed to complete the project within the scheduled timeframe that will be communicated with RV owners who use the facility. So the proposal is to approve funding in the amount of $71,851 to replace fencing at the adult center, Area Z RV storage site, Turfcare maintenance shop, and to refurbish the Area Z RV site. Lori, I know finance looked at these. Can you tell us what they had to say?
Certainly, there was 3 motions on the table. The first motion that we considered was allocating the funds from SURF. The second was to execute the contract, and the third was to authorize our current staff with on-call contractors to refurbish the maintenance. I'm sorry, to refurbish the Area Z storage area. The finance committee met with Mike Brock, who was presented the motions, and we all agreed unanimously to recommend the board approve all three motions as submitted.
Okay, so first off, doing this in the right order, I move that the SVCA Board of Directors, this is motion one, move that the SVCA Board of Directors approve the allocation of $71,851 from SURF to install new fencing at the Adult Center, Area Z RV storage area, Turfcare maintenance shop, and to refurbish the Area Z RV storage site.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, can we have a vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Motion two, move that the SVCA Board of Directors authorize the general manager to execute SVCA's standard construction contract with C&P Fencing with a not to exceed amount of $62,089.13.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, can we have a vote? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Motion three, move that the SVCA Board of Directors authorize the maintenance and facilities manager to utilize SVCA's on-call contractor list in conjunction with SVCA staff to refurbish the Area Z RV storage site with not to exceed amount of $9,761.87.
Second.
I'm assuming no discussion. All in favor? Again, unanimous.
Next one.
Next, we have a capital request, item 6B, Turfcare John Deere 2005 ProGator replacement. The purpose is a replacement of 2005 John Deere ProGator 2030A. The ProGator was purchased in used condition by SVCA in 2000 and something. According to the Turfcare maintenance technician, transmission issues have plagued this unit since day one of its use, and it now needs to be replaced as it is not functioning. The ProGator is scheduled to be replaced in 2025 with $51,917 allocated in SURF. Because of supply chain backlogs, placing the order now means that the new equipment will be available in early 2025. If we wait until 2025 to place the order, the equipment won't be received until the fall, well past the busy season for which it is most needed. Analysis, the unit is scheduled to be replaced in 2025. 3 manufacturers were asked for quotes to replace it. The recommended equipment and prices are summarized in the table that we were provided. After reviewing the quotes, we recommend the John Deere ProGator since it is the only model that will work with our current implements. Additionally, SVCA owns other John Deere ProGators and Gators which make maintenance easier and more efficient. So the request is that the Board of Directors approve the purchase of a new John Deere ProGator 2030A and allocate $52,093.44 from SURF. So I move that the Board of Directors approve the purchase of a new John Deere ProGator 2030A and allocate $52,093.44 from SURF.
Second.
And Lori,
The Finance Committee also discussed this motion, and we unanimously moved to recommend the Board of Directors approve the motion as written.
any comments or questions? AJ?
What, can you explain what implements means?
Sorry, were you?
I think he's got the,
Not a question for you.
Greg can answer the question.
So implements, rock box, the sprayer. We can't put the sprayer on any other unit other than just because of how the frame rails are designed.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. I miss,
The HVAC memo, I fixed the numbers. Yes,
okay, 6C, capital request, adult center HVAC change order. The purpose, to adjust funding to accommodate installation of air conditioning in addition to heating at the adult center. On April 25th, 2024, the SVCA Board of Directors approved the allocation of $7,009.98 for the replacement of the 2 furnaces that heat the adult center and authorized the GM to sign a contract with Linden Sheet Metal for the project. That contract was signed on April 30th, 2024. Shortly thereafter, during discussions with the Whatcom County Library System about the renewal of the lease of the adult center, library offered to pay for a one-time capital improvement in return for reduced monthly rent. This suggestion was incorporated into the new lease as a one-time payment of $40,000, which was approved by the board on June 27th, 2024. Analysis, Linden Sheet Metal revised their quote to incorporate heat pumps and upgraded the furnaces from 80% efficiency to 96% efficiency. These changes increased the cost of the project to $36,323.97. So the quoted cost was $36,323.97, original funding of $7,009.98, required additional funding of $29,313.99. The Whatcom Library's contribution was $40,000. Additional funding was $29,313.99, which left us with a surplus funds of $10,686.01. The request is that the Board of Directors approve an additional $29,313.99 in funding for capital project 9724.07, Adult Center HVAC replacement. Request that the Board of Directors approve the transfer of $40,000 from operations to SURF. The motion is, I move that the Board of Directors approve an additional $31,321.35 in funding for capital project 372407 Adult Center HVAC replacement.
Second.
So that amount is incorrect, Tammy. I'm so sorry. It should be 29,313. That's the additional funding.
Okay, so it's the 29,313.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of the 31?
Yeah.
Let me revise that motion. I move that the Board of Directors approve an additional $29,313.99 in funding for capital project 9724.07 Adult Center HVAC replacement.
Second for the revised motion.
And Lori, how did the Finance Committee vote?
The Finance Committee unanimously, ecstatically voted in favor that the board approve the additional 29,000, and we did vote on the corrected amount, the 29,313.99, that we did move that the board approve that, as well as the transfer of the $40,000 received by the library from operations to SURF.
And it should be noted that the library has already given us the $40,000. So we've been paid in full on that one. Any discussion on this? Questions, Rick?
I'd just like to express a note of appreciation, the fact that we, with these additional funds, we're able to increase the efficiency of our gas furnace from 80% to 96%. And on top of that, be able to also install a heat pump, which is demonstrated to be much more efficient than air conditioning or heating. So I think this is great. The only question I had was 40,000 going into SERP, originally was into ops, I think. So the excess, I'm just asking, I'm a newbie, is it customary to put it into SERP or leave it in ops?
Because it's designated as a payment of additional rent, rental income comes into operations. So in order to move it from operations to SURF, where the capital improvement will be paid for, out of that fund, the board needs to approve the movement of the funds. Any excess funds, of course, will then remain in SURF and increase our reserves.
Right, so that was just, I guess I'm splitting hairs of, it was in ops and we're putting it all into surf, and yet, I don't know, is it better in surf or ops? I don't know.
The intent of it was for the library to make a capital investment and so I think moving the funds there is appropriate, but it's kind of an accounting question. Joel, do you have an opinion about it?
No, it's perfectly fine if you want to leave, the excess and serve, that's fine. I'm going to account for the rental income and operations anyways, so. Because basically the 40,000 is, you could think of it as prepaid rent that will
Right.
be recognized over a 5-year period.
So
And
it's-
I might even account for it kind of in UDR to keep it out of operations, to reflect that it's money that we can't count on for operational expenses, so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah, or it could be interpreted as leasehold improvements too, right?
Yeah.
A capital expense rather than lease.
And it stays in capital.
Well, the association is going to pay for it out of SURF, which allows us to then depreciate it. But the income is clearly rent, so it must come into operations. And to keep the books straight, I would recommend transferring the entire amount. That was the intent behind the additional funds, and they certainly are needed in capital, so it's.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Trina, can we have a vote? All in favor? AJ? Are you abstaining or?
Opposed.
Okay. AJ is opposed, everyone else, so the motion passes. Yeah, I know. Also, second, I move that the Board of Directors approve the transfer of $40,000 from operations to SURF.
Second,
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
AJ, are you opposed? Thank you.
All right. Our last item, 6D, approval request, Barn 8 structural inspection. The purpose is to request approval to use obligated funds to pay for the first phase of a structural evaluation of Barn 8. On May 9th, 2024, the Sudden Valley Community Association Board of Directors directed the general manager to commission a structural evaluation of Barn 8. P&W Services has worked with Kingworks structural engineers and Cool Runnings to develop a plan for that work. Kingworks recommends using a two-phase approach to avoid completing unnecessary work. Phase 1 will focus on the building framing, including an analysis of the building's gravity support framing and lateral system. The analysis will determine whether the structural elements of the barn are adequate for the intended use. To complete the analysis, Kingworks has identified specific areas in which finishes, flooring, siding, drywall, ceilings, etc., will be removed so that they can directly observe the structural elements. A floor plan, which was attached, indicates in red where finishes will be removed. The removal and restoration of finishes will be completed by Cool Runnings. When the analysis is complete, Kingworks will prepare a report for SVCA and will also give a presentation to the board. The removal and restoration of finishes is not trivial. This work will include evacuation to excavation, I knew I said that wrong, excavation to expose the exterior concrete foundations, concrete slab removal, and excavation to expose interior concrete column foundations, exterior siding removal in numerous locations to expose the full height of the wall, first floor ceiling removal in numerous locations to expose ceiling and second floor framing, second floor interior wall covering removal to expose wall framing, second floor ceiling removal for one complete bay between column and trusses to expose roof framing structure. After KingWorks reviews the exposed areas, areas will be patched. Patching is proposed to be completed to a reasonable extent. For example, the existing siding will be reinstalled where possible. Second floor ceiling patching will be completed with plywood stained to match the existing ceiling. Drywall will be taped and patched, but not textured or painted. Based on the results of Phase 1, the board may elect to go forward with Phase 2, a structural condition survey. This portion of the work would include an exhaustive inspection of the framing and connections. Additional finishes that were not removed in Phase 1 would be removed in Phase 2 so that a majority of members and connections are accessible. Excuse me. To determine the extent of decay in the structural members, the building will have to be stripped so that the framing is in full view. This is a large undertaking. This is the reason that a phased approach is suggested. Phase 2 should only be completed if the structural analysis confirms that the structure is adequate for the intended use. The budget, KingWorks structural engineer is $19,200. Aerial lift rental, $9,800. Cool runnings, finish, demo, and repair, $43,084.80. Disposal and patching materials, $14,144. Concrete saw cutting, $3,808. Electrical, $5,440. P&W project oversight, $10,800 for a total of $116,904.48. Request that the Board of Directors approve the use of $116,904.48 from funds currently obligated to Project 9722.09 barn and refurbishment to pay for the proposed Phase 1 structural analysis. So I move that the Board of Directors approve the use of $116,904.48 from funds currently obligated to Project 9722.09 Barn 8 refurbishment to pay for the proposed Phase 1 structural analysis.
Second.
Lori, how did the Finance Committee vote?
I will summarize. We actually talked about this at length, and our conclusion was as no one wanted to see a number this high for the Phase 1, but we did determine that it was a very necessary investment that we need to make as an association to determine the structure of this building before putting nearly $1 million into it. We would rather find out, a little bit more before we move on. So we did recommend this. We did make a, in our motion, one addition, we added to the motion to just say that that this amount was for the structural analysis Phase 1 only and does not affect any plans approved, not approved, or in future to be approved on the remodeling of the structure.
Any questions or comments? Rick?
I was just looking at the total of 48 cents, and there's no 8 in any of the lines. So is there something I'm missing? It's just a critical adding error, but
It's new math.
yeah,
There's no.
probably a minor amount. But
I think it's on cool running.
There's a 10% contingency.
Oh, that's
sorry.
not showing in the budget.
Yeah, I didn't pull it over. It's in P&W's table, more accurately.
I'd like to, I want to ask to confirm, and probably Joel's going to be the only one that's going to be able to do this. I'm taking a number from stuff that was in our capital report. I'm assuming that we're talking that this 116,000 will be taken from the 761, 629 that's left unobligated in the barn 8 work, that project.
This project is 116 now.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's what I'm saying, is we've still got the 761,000 left in there, and then that's where the 116 90448 will come from, right?
Right, so there would be no additional funds obligated, but there would be less funding to spend on the eventual restoration of the envelope. when we
Gotcha.
got-
I'm
when
just
we get
trying to
there.
confirm that. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, basically the only two pools money available, the, obviously the covered bridge obviously doesn't apply to that, so it'd be that 266,262.
Well, we've got $759,000 already.
Yeah,
obligated.
and that's what, yeah, that's all. I'm just trying to confirm that that's what's left of that amount of money.
AJ, you had a question or comment?
I was just kind of curious what triggers phase two? Like what would be the trigger that we would move forward with that? Or what would be the trigger that would cause us to not move forward with that? And do we have any sort of ballpark idea of what that would cost?
I'll answer the second question first. No, we don't know what removing all those finishes would cost, but it would be more extensive than what we're proposing here. And you can see that that's extraordinarily costly, right? So it would be a significant investment. But the idea is that if the structure, the design of the structure that's currently in place cannot be enhanced or is not currently adequate, then it doesn't matter if any of the members are rotted, because even if you replace them, the structure itself would not be adequate for the intended use. And that putting together that as-built plan so they could run the numbers, the calculations on the structural elements to calculate, load bearing and everything else, that's what this phase one would be. So if they can say the structure as it is currently built, is adequate for the intended use, that may be a determination. And then we can say, well, are any of the members rotted? That would require actually looking at them to identify a percentage of rot. But if they come back and they say the structure as currently built does not support regular and continued use by the public, it does not support 300 people or 400 people in the dance barn, you would have to do these repairs or changes, enhancements to strengthening the structure in order to make it feasible for the intended use, then that would be a different finding that would require some thoughtfulness about it, about, well, what's the cost of those? And then what's the extent of the rot? And so those would be the two scenarios that could emerge. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, I guess. So if they do phase one and everything appears to be good, then we have to do phase two?
No, then we don't. Then we can determine, do we want to proceed with the siding? We're going to
Or would
have to
phase two
then,
Never be needed.
we're then going to have to repair like drywall that's in this part of the building. We'll probably have to put beams back up on the ceiling because I think it's just plywood they're going to put up to
Well,
patch.
they're not touching any beams,
Yep.
but this paneling, which is the finish, would be, it looks like tongue and groove. And we're proposing for this patching exercise to simply replace it with stained finish grade plywood. So it'll look different. And if we wanted to later restore it back to that plank material, that would be additional. But the reason that approving this does not approve phase two. Approving this says, if we discover that the structure is inadequate, it is not strong enough or able to be reinforced to the point where it is strong enough for the intended use, then it doesn't make sense to invest in replacing elements that may be rotted because ultimately it doesn't satisfy the need. I think that's what KingWorks' message is to us. There have been many things said and based on assumptions that the construction is similar to Barn 7, right? Well, we don't know if it's similar to Barn 7. One of the members did research using available pictures over time, and this article appeared in the Views, and it was pinpointed that Barn 8 was built last at a period of several years after Barn 7 was built in its original agricultural, use intent, right? Well, it doesn't necessarily follow that it has the same structure as Barn 7. So this would tell us exactly. It'll tell us whether the structural members are positively attached to the foundation or just sitting on the foundation. If they're just sitting on the foundation, if there's an earthquake event, there could be enough shifting so that the beam is no
Off the
longer
Foundation.
on the concrete thing, on the concrete foundation for it. If it shifts off that foundation, it will fall down. That causes the other members to bend, and that's when shear becomes a problem. So that's just one example of something they have to check. They would similarly need to check if there are positive connections attaching the roof. Because again, that has to do with lift from the wind when the structure is hit with those winds. So that's what's being evaluated.
There was a part of me, because I'm the one that sent in some of these questions at the end, is like, there's been a discussion about this dance floor that we're sitting on right now. And I'm like, so we're going to put a scissors lift on here. Is that okay to do that weight wise? And I guess, that's one of my concerns. My other concern was that there's no schedule. And I'm not sure, and I hope that if we approve this, that we can get a hold of Tyler immediately and get a schedule. We've got an AGM that's going to happen in here. And if we put an announcement out and an agenda out and a package to the membership, we have to know and be able to know that we're going to be able to be in this building on November 2nd, and it's not going to be a mess. I said I can see a giant scissors lift in here, sitting people and having an AGM. That's, so I hope that if they have a schedule, they'll deal with all of that because they're not going to completely repair anything they take apart in case we need to move to phase 2. So, that's why I hope that they put a schedule in effect as soon as they can, or we can get something fairly, soon to go, well, what do we need to plan for things that we have to use this facility for?
Sorry.
I've been thinking the same thing. I've read your questions that you submitted. And one of the things I just did recently is I was comparing rental rates of other facilities. And if this was not going to be able to be used in November, we would have to look at renting the gymnasium or cafeteria or something, maybe at Geneva or not Whatcom, but Colsha Middle School or something. So we do have options that we could, if we had to move our AGM, but we would need to know that ASAP before the printing went out and all of that. So, but I've been thinking of that same thing since I read your comment.
So as regards,
We also have, excuse me, we also have 2 candidate forums and a budget town hall as well.
Thanks, Rob.
August, he's saying there's the budget town hall and stuff and the candidates. I forgot about that. I apologize. There's also the candidates forum.
There'll be 2 of them. And we were planning kind of jumping ahead, but we were planning a meet and greet as well in the dance barn.
Just think it's something we need to think about.
yeah, well, the logistical elements of when the evaluation occurs can be timed around the events that are already planned. I also checked with a parliamentarian to see if we did for some reason have to move it, what effect that would have. And basically, when you give advance notice of a meeting like we are giving by mailing the ballots, it is possible to switch a room or a location, especially if there's a significant event. It's not just whimsical. So he did not, He did not say that that would be a legal issue of any matter. Obviously, it would be a communication problem, you know, and we want to get out to everybody, but that was his take on it. As regards the scissor lift, they had thought of that, and King Works had said that it would need to be operated over a layer of 1.5-inch plywood to distribute the weight, and that would ensure that it wouldn't go crashing through, thereby demolishing the floor.
Joanne, was that the parliamentarian we used last year?
Yes, I spoke with him, and I called him up and thanked him for letting us know that he had moved, letting him know we hadn't found anyone, so we might have to fly him in, and asking him about the potential of a venue change.
Thank you.
Just 2 days ago.
Any other questions or comments? AJ?
I guess I'm still not totally clear on the phase 1 to phase 2 thing. The way I'm reading this, it just says the review phase 1. If the owner elects to proceed, the remainder will be done. The way I'm reading that is like if phase 1 happens and the building's structurally deficient, then we wouldn't move through with phase 2. But if eventually we're moving towards doing the siding project and those projects, then phase 2 has to happen, right?
The only reason you would choose not to do phase 2 if you wanted to move forward is if you wanted to gamble that the amount of rot could be estimated, and that would affect the cost of the eventual project. Because the problem with phase 2 is that you have to take everything apart to see everything to accurately gauge how much of the structural wood would need to be replaced because of rot or other deterioration. So it's simply a matter of risk tolerance, whether you would do in that scenario. If the structure is adequate, and now we're not sure how much rot there is, if we are zero risk tolerant and we want to know the full cost to restore the building, we would do the second part of the study. It would mean that it would be out of use for a longer period of time. If we have some risk tolerance and are willing to go with an estimated amount of rot, and it's possible that estimate might be a lot more reliable than it is now because we'll have exposed a certain proportion of the structure to inspection, but not 100% of it. So if, you know, just making this up, let's say there's 20 upright members in the structure, and we expose 5 of them in the course of doing this, and we evaluate that all 5 are structurally sound, there's no rot or other deterioration, what is the likelihood that the remaining 15 would have been subject to rot?
Okay. And so basically we'd be looking to spend more than this estimate to determine how much rot, but couldn't that just be, is the amount of rot simply to determine cost estimates for what needs to actually be replaced, or can phase 2 determine that the building, phase 1 is determining the building structurally sufficient, phase 2 is then enhancing our cost estimate to determine more exactly how much rot there is by basically ripping the building apart?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. The first phase is a structural evaluation. It's based on a design, right? The second phase is a condition evaluation, which would require examination of all the members. If you wanted 100% accuracy in an understanding of what the cost would be to restore what has been determined to be a sufficient structure. So
we're looking at like $300,000 to get to there.
It all depends. You know, everybody talks about Barn 7, and I'm going to talk about Barn 7. This building is so much different than Barn 7. Barn 7 had a leaking roof, which only when somebody complained about it finally, because there was a theater group here that used to store their stuff in there, did they fix it. We've had a really nice metal roof on this building for years. It's heated. It's been basically far more well preserved than anything over in Barn 7. That upper barn, the only thing, the lower barn held golf carts in the winter. And that was it. Sometimes we had Halloween things in the haunted lower barn. It had a dirt floor. So it's a building that wasn't heated, wasn't used at all, wasn't maintained in any way, shape, or form. And I think that to do this initial study, they're going to be able to come back and say, is there roof damage up here before they put on the nice metal roof? Metal roofs aren't put on easily, although I think they'd have to find the paperwork for it. But I think that this is a real first step to say, you know, where are we? You know, there's already issues with the floor here. There's a question of how stable is the dance floor? You know, and do we want 300 people back in here again doing line dancing? But, you know, I think we need to know. I kind of have a more optimistic point. I think the thing that scares me more than anything is I know in looking at pictures that I have of the Barn 7 basement, that there were places where the foundation had crumbled already. And I would worry about our outer foundational, that foundational structure being the same possibly for this. And then there's the whole thing with how are the beams attached to those footings? You know, I was surprised when Quentin said that it's possible that there's what are they? Steel rods. Rebar that connect them both. I should go look at some of my other pictures. There's lots of really, really good pictures from when the library did their work. And that would be my one question, is if they're just sitting on there, that's scary.
I've got a question. The Nisqually earthquake, what was it, maybe 20, 25 years ago, that big one down south, was that felt up here in any way? I guess my question is have we experienced any earthquakes up here that were felt?
I have no information on that, Rob. I think it's a good question, but I don't have any information. I'd like to interject something. The memo that caused the board to reconsider going forward before more information was gathered had structural concerns, not necessarily condition concerns. There were structural concerns. And at that time, we also shared that we had seen a set of plans that had been drawn up in the early 2000s to add shear walls to the structure, which is one of the specific recommendations that was made by KingWorks when they wrote that memo. So if they can evaluate the structure, that can address the concerns that they raised in that memo about using this barn without adding shear walls and without making positive connections between the roof and the outer and the structural elements. Those were the two big things that they had raised. And this phase 1 analysis would tell us would answer those particular questions. The original plan for the replacement of siding on Barn 8 did include money for the replacement of any wood that had rotted, which they would see when they took off all the siding. Well, they would have to take off all the siding to do phase 2. You see, and that's exactly what I think you're saying, AJ, is why would we pay them to take it off to do the second thing if they would have to do that for the siding anyway?
Phase 2 seems like a money grab to me, but seems pointless. We would just, at that point, we would move forward with the siding project with the contingency for rotted wood. Why would we tear it all off, repair it, and then several months later tear it all off again, the rest of it and all of it that we repaired back up
Precisely.
to do the siding?
Right. So that's why I think they're saying, I mean, KingWorks is saying, just do phase 1, learn, and then decide. And I think that's sensible. That's
And we are
Good
just voting on phase 1 at this point. We're not voting on phase 2.
I think too, if KingWorks takes a look at that outside the siding, they're going to be able to tell, do we really, you know, do we need to put a budget in and install shear wall. I
Right.
think when they looked at it way back in 2000, as someone who knows that there used to be far less money that went in for surf, it used to be called MMR. And it was probably when they got the bid for it, it was just too much money. And that's why the plans are there and they're preliminary, but they never moved forward with the project.
Yeah, we've been in stalemate on doing something with this building for a while before I got here anyway. I think we're pretty much forced to actually do this phase one just to find out what can be done or if it can't be done. The timing, I think they should, like you brought up, we do need a schedule so they're not messing with everything else that's trying to go on and keep functioning, keep the community happy. Same time, but they should be able to, hey, we can do this test, do this test and get it done and not hold the thing up for like 3 months. So I would think we need to do it and get a good schedule that works with us. We're the customer. We should be able to tell them what can be done and what can't and what time frame.
I know there's part of that that already says that the gym, I think, is gonna have to be closed for a week, correct? So that's been stipulated in here, just nothing about this upper building, and that's kind of what I focused on.
Any other questions or comments? So all those in favor? That's unanimous.
Right.
And we are done. We're adjourned. Meeting ends at
What
9:33.
time? 9:33?
Second that.